Greetings, valiant souls, and it is my honor to welcome you here today for Open Betas, a podcast about the life of games and the game of life. We shall wield our words like swords and our honor like shields as we deliver unto you a tale of exploration, innovation, teamwork, friendship, chivalry, and the untamed spirit of humankind. I'm Swimfan.
I'm Regal.
Welcome.
I successfully
Open
didn't laugh
Betas.
during that. It's pretty good.
Was that what you were looking for? How'd I do?
Yeah, it was great.
All right,
Very
thank
good.
you. Thank you. I need that feedback.
Chivalry probably doesn't apply to our topic today, unfortunately.
Well, as a juxtaposition to this topic, it may come up.
I guess if you're Robin Hood, maybe it's chivalrous in a roundabout way.
Well, and one thing I liked about being a thief in this one of these games we're going to talk about is that in multiplayer, when you rob somebody in a fantasy game, they may chastise you in character, like talk about how you are without honor, and chivalry comes up too. So, and I love that, man. I love it when they get into that shit. It was the funniest.
I sure do love role-playing. So speaking of which, what is our topic today?
Our topic today is thievery. Stealing stuff in games. Why do we do it? Is it fun? What about stealth games? Is stealth a thief game? Is thief a stealth game? More on that.
A little bit of both, I guess.
Coming up next on Open Betas.
But first, we have some patch notes.
Yes.
Oh, I had some more long-form stuff I want to talk about, but I decided that it wasn't... takes too much energy to talk about feedback stuff. And
Oh, do we
talking
get
to people on the
feedback?
internet. No, we didn't.
Oh.
But I was the thing I wanted to talk about. It has to do with what we're going to talk about at some point with Pokemon Go. So I wanted to bring up something similar, but I decided to skip it for now. So very short this week. Last week we talked about P sports, right? Briefly. I think one of the things
Physical
we said was
sports.
like how the net, like a net sport, the net is kind of like an arbitrary object.
Yeah. I mean, but it's sort of the crux of the challenge of
Yeah.
whatever the game is. Yeah.
But actually, I thought about it a very small amount more. I'm actually a little disappointed in myself that I didn't immediately realize this, but it actually serves a very important purpose. I mean, so the purpose of all these games is to make a volley, right? So the idea is like you have to hit the ball according to some rules in a way to prevent your opponent from being able to hit it, but also so that they can hit it back. So if you imagine playing volleyball without a net, but the rules are exactly the same, what would you do? You would like roll the ball to your opponent, right? Because in volleyball, if the ball bounces,
Yeah, you just chuck it right to the front corner.
yeah,
without having
or
to go
you
over the
would
net.
right, or you would just literally like put it, like take the ball and like put it on the line, or like roll it towards them. There's no way they can prevent it from hitting the ground, right? So this is where we sort of see in many cases, the relationship between the game designer, right, in this case, the sport and the player is sort of adversarial, right? The player always wants it to be as easy as possible to hit the ball so that the opponent can't get it. But the game's goal is to sort of make it harder for the player to do that.
Yeah, because I mean, you just pointed out, like if they did allow that, that would just where would the competition? It would be very different, and it certainly may not be the range of competitive strategies people want to watch.
Right, exactly. So the point of the game is to like make a fun product, make a fun experience. It's not to make it as easy as possible for the player, which is something that's very important. It's like a base idea, but it's important to keep in mind. And this actually applies very easily to all net sports. Like all of this net sports and games are built around like hitting the ball back and forth, right? Until something happens. And
you win if you hit it last, basically.
Yeah.
Well, not always, but
if they fail in some way, right? But the only way that's possible is that the net dictates that you have to like hit it within or hit it above a certain point, so it's possible to return essentially.
Yeah, and it it limits the areas it can land, and
Right, that too.
often makes you jump up high, and that's fun to look at.
Yep.
And play and do. I assume I can't jump high.
Neither can I. I can hit.
You
I can
didn't
hit
use
stuff
the
with
dunk?
No, I didn't use the dunk actually.
Okay.
There was I was at some like sports. It wasn't really a camp. It was like a summer sports activity,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a dunking. The counselors got together and had like a dunking exposition, and all the kids
Really?
were supposed to look forward to it, and
Mhm.
they dunked cookies into milk. That was the joke. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So the kids were not very amused actually.
Did the kids
but
get cookies though?
I actually think I wasn't there that day. Funny
Oh.
enough, but
That'd be a riot if they didn't, I guess.
yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and I forgot you don't like basketball. It's dumb.
Well, I guess we can talk about that at a later day.
You've talked
basketball.
about it a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it.
All
We
right.
can now
Stealing,
roll on to
thieving.
chivalry.
So admittedly, I know this about myself. I personally am into thiefy stuff, stealing stuff, movies about that, books about that, games about that.
What's the best Oceans movie?
I don't know. The first one, I guess.
There's the first one. I thought it started at like 7, but okay.
Yeah. So Ocean's 11, I guess it would be the first
Oh,
one, right?
that's the first one.
I believe so.
Oh, okay, I was right. Okay, never mind.
Yeah,
Got it.
11.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a lot. Look at that number. You usually go with 7. Movies like 7, but
Yeah.
there
What can you do?
4 more. So
You like
yeah,
beefy stuff?
and so yes, I like thief. I've always liked thieving stuff, and it's another less popular thing, or in some contexts just sort of generically available, but it's another thing that's forbidden in real life that games let you indulge in. So, similar to fighting and killing and sniping and stuff like that games let you do, or, carjacking or romancing an alien.
I think that would probably be legal, but it's very difficult. You have to have a lot of money to romance.
Are
aliens.
you kidding me? People would be up in arms about that shit. They'd be like, we can't mix the aliens with the humans. Is that what God likes? Come on.
Maybe like half the population. I think.
They wouldn't be able to stop us, though.
Yeah.
I mean, stop whoever did that. So it's one of those things. It's one of those gameplay things where you can feel a little naughty, like you're getting away with something. It's something that you might have fun doing in a game that you can't or shouldn't do in real life. You don't want similar to getting into a fist fight. You don't really. It's not a great thing to do that in real life, but you can play that in a game.
Although that's actually not so hard to do, like legally. You can just go to a like MMA gym and you can get into a large
That's
number
true.
of fist
You can
fights.
just sign up for
Unfortunately,
a sport where you punch
have to
somebody.
like actually get punched if you do that. And that's not a lot of fun.
And that's another reason. That's another reason I've always liked thievery stuff in games for the fantasy of it, right? Like as a skinny nerd, it's harder for me to get into the mindset of a like fighter warrior type, or even I could, a wizard, a magic user rather, is an interesting archetype that I could get into, but it's not at all realistic, right? Like I could never be a wizard. There are no spells for me to cast. A warrior, somebody could do. You could work out, learn the sword, live by the sword, die by the sword. But I'm not going to do that. I don't have the frame for it. I don't have I'm too lazy, basically, to ever do that.
For you, they made these great inventions called assault rifles. And you can have all your power fantasies.
I could be a tier
as much
1
as you want.
operator. That's what I could be. That's lame. So thieving though, sneaking around, being quiet, taking stuff without people noticing, picking locks. That's a real thing you can learn how to do.
That's a real thing you have learned how to do, right?
Yeah. So I, in high school, picked up lockpicking from a book. This is before there were YouTube videos, but they sent me a VHS tape.
I remember those.
And I learned the basics of lockpicking, and it's really not that hard. It's kind of interesting and scary once you learn how easy it is, but also given how easy it is, it doesn't actually happen that often. A lot of thieves are more likely just opening a door that's not locked or just breaking a window, the old-fashioned busting
It's really
in.
not very. You first become scared when you realize. I think we talked about this before. You first become scared when you realize that, but then you look around the rest of your house and you realize actually it's very easy to get in here if someone wanted to.
If someone were really trying to get into your place, they can do it. But it kind of just depends on the risk factor and the amount of effort, probably.
Right.
So don't leave your garage door open. That's when they get you.
I mean, most people have their windows open and screens on them, right? That's probably the easiest way to get in. Or they show up at your door with a maintenance outfit on. And they're like,
and
hey,
say they're here to fix the phone.
Yeah.
That works.
Yep.
It's worked on me many times. So one thing I found interesting that you mentioned you wanted to talk about with thievery in games before we get into specific scintillating examples is stealth, and in particular like stealing based games, like games about robbing banks or houses or whatever, are much less popular compared to fighting and shooting, killing. And, also sports and driving are another fantasy thing that, wild driving, racing. But why do you suppose that is? Is it just easier to make that kind of a game? Are stealing games harder to make fun? Are fewer people into that fantasy? Am I just a weirdo?
I think it's a little bit of all of them.
Wow.
I think one key point is that when you're making, and I'll start with stealth, right? Because thievery is sort of a specific branch of a stealth game.
It is, yeah. I wish it weren't, but it is.
Yeah. When you're making specifically a stealth game, at least based on, there's a lot of limitations that come from fulfilling that fantasy, right? Okay. So if you start with the baseline assumption, you have two paths, right? One is you're Rambo, and you don't take damage, and you can just run in and start blasting like most like shooting fighting games, Wolfenstein, whatever, right?
You can take shots, you can take bullets.
That is actually predicated on the idea that either you can somehow defeat like 100 people by yourself, right? Or 1,000 people by yourself. So for that to happen, you need to either, be really strong or be able to take a lot of damage or whatever, right?
Or respawn all the time.
Yeah, right, exactly. Something like that. So you have more avenues as a character to like overpower your enemies in that way. In order to make a stealth game feel like a stealth game, feel like what you're doing stealth-wise matters, a lot of that has to stop being true, right? So for example, in a stealth game, when you are caught, you can't be allowed to just fight the enemy and then beat the enemy, right?
Right.
If you're able
some
to
games do that, but it sort of like breaks the whole concept.
Exactly.
Right?
It sort of breaks the immersion, right?
The premise.
The
immersion.
So for example, there is this ancient Japanese like dungeon crawling game series called Etrian Odyssey. It's like
I may have played it. I've seen it.
So someone's played a couple of the games over the years. Anyway, it and a lot of other like classic Japanese dungeon crawling games have this feature where like on the world map there's this like there's normal enemies that you find, there's like huge enemy that you can't beat that you have to like stealth around one way or another, right? And that's sort of one way you can do it, where there's certain enemies that are just way too strong for you, and while you can theoretically fight them, and in the future you can come back and fight them when you get stronger, like in the moment you have to run from that. You can't get caught by them, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of a classic like open world RPG thing as well. Like they have the big monsters wandering around. Although I guess that's less. You don't necessarily have to sneak around. It's more just avoiding them.
I think that is something that's common, but less common these days. But anyway, I think the point being is that in a stealth game, you can't be allowed to fight your way out of being caught, right? That's sort of the whole point. Therefore, you as the character have, you have less agency, you have less control over how to win and how to lose, right? Basically, you sort of have to get boiled down to this idea where if you get caught, you die and the game ends, or something close to that happens. Right?
Yeah, like if you get caught, it's either insta death or it is evade and hide kind of gameplay.
Right.
And then, realistically, the soldiers forget about everything that happened 5 minutes later and go back to patrolling normally.
Right, which is definitely not what would happen.
Did we see somebody? There was a guy with a gun, right? He's gone. Which is a pretty common choice that games do. Is just like, now Metal Gear is just like, I mean, you can shoot your way out in Metal Gear as well.
Right. You can also
generally you lose out on stuff.
Yeah. You can in what's Hitman, right? The assassination games, it's kind of similar.
Yeah,
that has more combat, but
games.
Yeah, that one has more realism. And when you get shot, you can't get shot that many times; you'll actually die, right?
Yeah, and it can be fun, and I think a certain type of player is like wants that ability to have that. Just like, what, fuck it, I'm gonna blow everybody away.
And I think that's almost more realistic in some way. Right, because those are sort of putting you in a situation where do you have a plan B if you get shot, or if you get caught? Sorry, not if you get shot. No one has a plan B if they get shot. Like if you get caught in real life, do you have can you find some way to scramble your way out of it? Which is like a common thing in action movies, right?
It is, yeah.
Right.
I mean, in real life, I'd probably be just like frozen in fear and then blown away. But But yeah, I see what you mean. There, Plan B in movies, especially, right? You shoot your way out.
But I would say that there is some limit where for it to be like a fulfilling stealth / thievery type game, you can't have too much combat in it. You can't really have the ability to realistically shoot your way out of anything. At which point it just becomes a shooting game, right?
I think
and
like
doesn't matter.
The closest you can be is like someone almost catches you and you silently knife them before they can raise the alarm or whatever.
Like one or two people, but then once it escalates to a point, you fail and need to start over.
And also there's of course, if you don't kill people, or even if you do kill people, the whole the enemy seems to forget you're here, or once you move on to the next area, it doesn't matter that there's a bunch of bodies you left behind.
Right, exactly.
And of course, we can knock people out or tranquilize them without giving them brain damage.
Oh, well, we don't know about that. We don't have to live with the consequences of our actions.
Yeah.
They're NPCs. We'll talk about that.
That whole movie game thing of just choke them out, and then they'll pass out for 10 minutes, and then they'll be fine. That's not fine. In real life, that'd be real bad.
Well, the alternative is shooting them. So
I know. So what's
one way or another?
What's some life-ending brain damage between friends?
And the other, sorry, I just want to bring up horror games, which is actually stealth games are very, very similar, I think, to horror games. And the reason I think that is because you want, exactly. You want the player to not have the power to fight their way out of the situation. That's the reason the horror game is scary is that you don't have a gun, and when something jump scares you, you can't just shoot it, right? Obviously,
we're talking about that sort of horror game because, of course, Resident Evil is
right. Exactly, I was going to say Resident Evil. Obviously, there's is sort of a crossover between the two, right? But that one is more jump scare, where at any given point you have the power, whereas there's other Amnesia and Outlast or whatever are horror games where you have no ability to fight. And that's why even a single enemy is really scary, right?
Yeah.
Just because all you can do is run. And I think that the reason that tension appears in the horror game is very similar to why a stealth game feels fulfilling if it's done correctly.
Yeah, I
And if you
mean,
think about it that way, it becomes almost like a puzzle game, right?
I think definitely.
Hmm.
Well, there's a mix, but I think a real fun gameplay type is sort of stealth puzzles. There's all the way on the spectrum of more open world, like here's the physics of the world and how all the mechanics work, and they sort of come together in ways where you can improvise your way through in fun paths. Or there's the like very specific, Commandos 3 gameplay of we have a puzzle laid out for you that you can get through if you use all of your abilities in a certain way. It's not necessarily realistic, but it's fun to devise the puzzle because it really, stretches all what you know about your abilities and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Um, Enter the Ninja, I think, is a good one that is more the sort of open world stuff combined with some puzzly rooms where we reach where it's like there is a one way to do this and you got to figure what it is. Um, yeah,
Yep.
that's it.
Yeah, but the reason I think it becomes very similar to puzzle gameplay is again because you don't have combat, right? You don't have, or like you're
Yeah.
purposely taking out the idea of like using stats and weapons and attacks like overpower your enemy. You have to solve it in a specific catered way,
Yeah, and if you
which
get into
reduces
combat,
the
it's like a knife to the back of the neck
right,
sort of thing.
right,
Yeah, it's not different. You
um,
can't get loot that makes it even better
right.
necessarily.
And I think that the point that it distills down to is that it shrinks the domain. It shrinks the surface area of how many different ways the player can interact with a game. Right. When the player is faced with a challenge especially in a pure puzzle game, but any kind of game that sort of has these kind of elements, there's usually only one or very very few ways the player can actually get through it. Right. Whereas if you consider for example, a JRPG, if a player is faced with a difficult enemy, there's thousands of ways the player can attempt to get around it, right? You can
You mean
use
like
any
different ways to combat?
right, to combat it, exactly, right? Because combat offers you a lot of options
I think
for
okay, it does, but realistically, in JRPGs, you have few options to choose from to approach a battle. I think not thousands that are realistically gonna work. I think you.
well, okay, I'm counting like different actual things you can do, not different types of strategies. So
Yeah,
I would
so,
consider
but
like
I guess I could say with stealth games, Deus Ex, like, okay, I can sneak through the ductwork, I can hack the
right.
security cameras, or I can distract this guy this or that. There are a lot of different ways to
Mhm.
approach some of those puzzles. They're more open world, like I said.
Yeah, that's true.
So I
It
don't know. I'm just not. I guess I disagree about the more choices thing.
it goes up and down depending on the game, but I would still say so. For example, in a JRPG, you fight, let's say Pokemon, right? You fight a difficult gym.
Mhm.
That doesn't happen anymore, but back in the day, you fight a difficult gym that you have difficulty getting through.
It doesn't happen anymore because it's so
No,
easy. You mean?
because it's so easy. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That that you have difficulty getting through. So you have, at a high level, you have strategic options, right? You can make your current Pokemon stronger. You can you can find some kind of system advantage, so type
Hmm.
advantage, whatever, right? You can use items. You can go somewhere else and try to circumvent it. That's more of a puzzle design aspect. But in each of those, there's a lot more decisions I think that you can make. Getting stronger in order to overpower the enemy with what you currently have is not a singular choice. Whereas
Hmm.
like throwing a distraction to the guard is sort of like a singular, there's only one way to do this, right? Getting stronger, you can do it by doing like 10 different things, right? And then catching a Pokemon to use type advantages, you can choose from like 30 different Pokemon or whatever, right?
Sure.
Those I think you can reasonably argue that those are not meaningfully different choices, but for the
Yeah.
player, it can be a lot less frustrating if one of those 30 choices is really not implemented well, right?
Hmm.
You feel like you have more options to do other stuff, or you can find other stuff as well. Whereas in a stealth game or a puzzle game, if the stealth part isn't implemented well, it can be very frustrating because you realize that all you can do is this one thing that the developer put here for you to be able to do. And if it doesn't work well, then you have no recourse. Right.
Yeah. That said, I think a well-made stealth game, a modern stealth game, does, again, I guess I'm just saying it again, but they do. There are options like Cyberpunk. Like you talk about distracting an enemy. Yeah, you can throw the tin can. You can hack his implants. You can make the fucking vending machine drop free shit. It all kind of boils down to distract the guy, but a lot of the stuff you described, I think, boils down to buff your dudes.
I think that's fair. I think in a well-made game, it's harder to tell the difference, I guess. In a well-made game, it fits together well. But I guess what I'm thinking of is so there is this thing in a lot of JRPGs, even today, but mostly like I'm thinking like 10, 15 years ago, where they would just put one stealth mission in every game. And it was mostly terrible.
Well, and this is something that I think has hurt the reputation of stealth games, which is the tendency, and I don't think we're ever going to be totally out of it, but we're past the worst of it. But the tendency to like put in a stealth mission, a stealth section into your game that is some other genre, basically.
Right.
And some people just do not want that kind of gameplay, period. It just is like, it's frustrating, it's disempowering, like, I don't play games for this shit. And that's fair. That's fair. I didn't get it. I didn't pick up fucking Call of Duty or, Zelda or Mario to do a stealth section, but there are some stealth section in some of those games. I remember there's a stealth section in Legend of Zelda Wind Waker near the beginning of the game that is very frustrating, where if you get caught, you get sent back to the jail, which is at the beginning, and you have to do everything all over again. And all they have to do is just spot you. You don't have to be caught or anything. And it sucked. Like, that sucks. It's like you say, if it's not a good game, that's not right. If the game isn't good at that, it's going to be kind of bad, right? Yeah. And so,
And like you said, it's when a game does it well is usually when a game focuses on it, right? Or when it's like a core part of the game and there's sort of actually design something and not just sort of mail it in, which is what it often feels like.
And I like a game that's kind of a mixture of the two, rather kind of an inversion of the ratio, rather. That The Last of Us is very, very stealthy, but generally you'll eventually get spotted and it'll devolve into a firefight. And I think the second one did better at letting you like stealth the whole thing. Their earlier games are like, no matter what, eventually you're going to have to shoot your way out. But that has the right mixture for me. It's like, well, yeah, you can go loud, but if there's too many enemies around, you will be overwhelmed. So stealthing your way either past them or, snapping a couple of necks is a good strategy first before firing anything.
I think that makes sense. I think I would agree that that's the balance that feels both the most realistic and can also be the least frustrating, right? Because like you said in Zelda, it's very frustrating when someone sees you and then you lose, right? Especially, for example, if you're almost out, you would think, why can't I just run over there, right?
Especially with Zelda, right? Like, I mean, in that case, you didn't have your equipment. There's always that excuse, right? But still throw a rock at the guy. You can do that.
Exactly.
Pick out your baton, man.
I'll take one more quick detour and then we can get back on track.
Okay, I was going to suggest we move on.
Very similar thing is in Guild Wars 2. For a long time when I played, I think they stopped this at some point way after.
That's an MMO?
It's an MMO. Okay. That's an MMO. And like most MMOs, it had zones. So when you're level 1 to 5, you're in this zone. And then when you're 5 to 15, you go over here. And all the enemies here are level 5 to 15. And you can sort of do it at that level. For a long time, they did this thing where when you're max level, you're level 80, and you go back to the level 5 zone, you get scaled back down to level 5. Oh. And so that actually was very annoying because the reason you would go back is often to, you don't get anything from doing the, combat content anymore, right? You already did all the quests in there or whatever. You're going there for like collectibles or for
where
life
it drops.
skills. Yeah, I don't know if those still existed, but it was very frustrating because doing your collectibles became a stealth game in many ways, right? It was a stealth game. It's not
environmental collectibles. Okay,
yeah. So it's like, oh, I'm here to like, there's like these 7 waypoints or whatever that I want to visit and get my achievement at. But you go there and the whole time you have to like avoid the enemies that would normally aggro onto you.
Yeah.
Right? So doing all that stuff became a stealth game, and where I think it really didn't fit what that content was meant to do, right? It's sort of like normally that stuff is like a relaxing
that facilitates stealth. I don't know.
Right. In most cases, that kind of content in MMOs is supposed to be like a very relaxing, like collect-a-thon, right? You just walk around and collect stuff and you look at stuff. Turning it back into a stealth game was very frustrating, I think, for a lot of people, me included, where you didn't, I don't want to have a combat in this section. I don't want to sneak around in the section. Even if I can win the combat, it just takes a lot of time, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, another outcome of level scaling. Although I guess it's kind of in reverse, which makes sense for the MMO.
Yeah, and that's sort of the same idea as like you're not able to overpower your enemies, right?
Yeah.
Which in that case, though,
I think we've talked about.
Like
I'm generally against level scaling in the games I play because I want to go back to zone 1 and just like stomp on everything.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, now we can move on.
Okay. I want to make mention of the ethics of game worlds. I talked about the sort of the fantasy of it and getting away with something cool. But what about in games where there is a deep story or characters and you actually feel guilt out of doing something out of character, like or is there just a total ludonarrative dissonance of your guy's a hero but he walks into houses and opens their treasure chests? I mean, so, it can range from, it really kind of depends on how the game responds to it. But do I want to talk about that, or do I want to talk about... Let's talk for a second about my own kleptomaniacal tendencies.
I was going to say, I can talk about that for like 30 minutes, so maybe we should save that for slightly later.
Okay, all right. We can get into that later. So, some of the interesting stuff to me is the gameplay that comes out of thievery. I get a lot of joy out of the scrounging gameplay, rifling through drawers and finding hidden treasure chests and discovering treasures, uncovering hidden hiding spots and stuff.
Actually, so do you like survival games, actually?
Survival games?
Yeah, like open world survival craft, the hot new genre of 2021, when every single new game was open world survival craft.
So this is interesting. I do, but I don't like them as much as civilization type. That's the wrong word. Like real world, like cities, houses, stuff, human stuff that you're searching is way more interesting to me than digging through the brush for the right herb. Although I do like that sometimes. That can be fun. I do like just walking around pretty places. But for thievery and scrounging, I like the idea. I like the post-apocalyptic, like, all right, this was somebody's house, but they're not here anymore. We're going to go through all the drawers and see if we can get anything we can use. Or
so the people don't have to be alive. You don't have to steal from people.
Just scrounging stuff like Fallout and to some extent, just looting a cave or looting looting an enemy base is more my speed. Where you have stuff. You might find a strong box hidden behind a plank of wood, for example.
Now
that's
that
I love
another question for you.
Strong box.
Do you find it less rewarding when that stuff is randomly generated, or is it just anything that's like that?
Again, I think it comes back to, does it feel quality? But
okay.
generally, based on what I've played, yeah, I do prefer it to be designed rather than randomly generated, because there is something. I think I want. Yeah, I want it to. I guess yeah, I'm not sure. I can't think of good examples that are randomly generated, unfortunately.
It's hard to find. Yeah, I would expect that most people would agree with you. Where a lot of the thrill, I think a lot of it, and this is just a total hunch because I don't necessarily feel this as strongly, but I think a lot of the thrill comes from like being able to piece together something about the world or the story or the person who lived here or the area or something like that.
Yes, exactly. And I think in particular, I like the idea of the person who lives or lived here. Where would they hide their shit? Like, that's really fun to me. Like, I like that as a klepto. I like that idea.
Right.
And I talked about when, scrounging where there's, people are long dead or whatever, long gone. But I do prefer stealing when somebody's living there, whether or not they are actually at home or at the, store or the bank or whatever you're robbing.
Right.
Those are different types of things. They both have their pros and cons. But I like being where you shouldn't be. Like the thought you could get caught and thrown in prison, or have to restart. And stealing without getting caught is really fun. I like the idea of a plan coming together. Heist, the team, the plan, the getaway.
A man, a plan, a canal.
And and what's that?
A man, a plan, a canal.
What's that? A canal?
A man, a plan, a canal. Panama is a common example of a palindrome. Anyway.
Oh, a man, a plan, what was it?
Canal, Panama.
A canal. Canal what?
A canal, comma, Panama.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
There you go.
Rise to vote, sir. That's another. So, yeah, I love that stuff. And a lot of it is also the fun of getting through without hurting anyone or without killing anyone. Although sometimes there are examples of where it can be fun to assassinate somebody as well as rob them.
I mean, if you play games, I think you have to find some fun in killing stuff.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's sort
of... clubbing guards with a blackjack and piling them up in the basement.
Sure.
So they'll be unconscious for as long as you're there. And then I really like about thieving games and thieving characters, you often have specific thief skills, which again I like because they're often things that you could actually potentially do in real life, even though I probably never will.
probably
Sneaking and picking locks, sure, but climbing or sometimes hacking is part of this sort of thing. Then there's like disarming traps, and even backstabbing is often something that goes with it, but it's a little more violent. I like all that shit, and in a lot of those cases, maybe when I was in my prime, I could do those things. Tightrope walking, that's sometimes acrobatics enter into it in some games.
Sure.
For some reason,
Use chandelier or whatever.
Oh yeah, you saw that. I mean, in the later Quest for Glory games, you can do like flips and acrobatic jumps and stuff. So anyway, there's that. There's also options in games, real life targets versus kind of fantasy targets. We kind of just talked about this, but banks and stores and houses that you might see in a GTA or a Thief, versus dungeons and tombs and enemy bases and stuff like that. That it's a little bit more like it feels a little bit more heroic. And
Sure.
You're an adventurer, you're a tomb raider, not a
Right.
Even though you're probably robbing cultures of their precious art.
Sure. Yeah.
So how does the game react to thievery? What are the different ways? There's a range, and it sort of runs the gamut of gameplay types, basically. Like, what kind of game do you want to have? So there can be blasé and different NPCs who just do not seem to notice or care that you are smashing their pots and stealing their rupees, or opening treasure chests that are upstairs in their house, or opening a drawer to find a potion or whatever. They don't even notice. They still just tell you about their thoughts on Sephiroth or whatever. Final Fantasy, Zelda games come to mind. Then there's the more Law and Order NPCs, where like you are being watched when you're in town or whatever. Like if you get seen stealing something, they act more like I guess more realistically. So, Elder Scrolls, you're stealing the sticky buns or whatever. And it, when you mouse over it or hover over it, it says steal rather than pick up, because you're not in a dungeon, you're at the tavern. And if you pick it up, they'll be like, "Hey, put that bun down." And if you don't, they'll pull their sword and say, "Hey, stranger, we don't take kindly to thieves." And then they'll just, fight you.
The thing is, those are Bethesda games, so they don't, they work at a very surface level, right? But you can very easily circumvent them in often amusing and
you mean like
ways.
If they're slightly turned the other way, or
or I think there's often glitches where it's like you can just pick something up and put it down, or
if you put
something
it
like that
in a bucket or something, they can't see it anymore.
And then you take the bucket with you. There's a lot of ways to sell the shopkeeper's inventory back to them, I believe.
There's a lot of broken thievery in Elder Scrolls games, and real thievery. I mean, since I think Morrowind or Daggerfall, you can sneak into shops and rob them and stuff. Fun stuff. And like GTA is all kind of built around that idea. Is if the NPCs spot you, they're going to call the police, and then you get a wanted level, and it's all about running from the cops. Or
shooting
running them down.
Thousands of them.
Or shooting thousands of them. Yeah.
There's so I think one of the difference, even when it comes to Law and Order, is that they don't really behave quote unquote realistically, right? In real life, if you get caught stealing like a bun or something, it's probably fine. But if you get caught breaking into someone's house, there's much more real harsh penalties that happen to you, other than, getting a fade to black and then spawning in front of the police station, right?
I mean, that's going to affect your life in a huge way at the very least, probably. At
the very, very minimum, you get like a felony on your record, right? That's not something that's something that you have to live with the rest of your life.
You may have to go to jail for a bit.
And of course, in medieval times, the penalties were often much harsher, right? Like you hear about people being mutilated for being caught stealing.
Get your hand cut off or something.
So obviously that sort of defeats the point of the game. But even when sort of the reason you feel free to attempt those things is that those things don't happen to you, either in the game or in real life. Right?
It's like there's the consequencelessness of games. Like you can try whatever you want, and the very worst, you just load that save.
However, I think that can all happen because it's to an NPC. But the next point is what do you do when you steal in the multiplayer game? And in those cases, real life actually comes back into play, right?
I think that it's a totally different type of game, basically. I mean, not totally different, but you're playing with a whole different set of rules with multiplayer, like you say. One thing you just mentioned, though, that I do want to mention is many players find stealth games frustrating because they want it to go perfect. So either whether or not the game lets you restart immediately from where you got caught, they will be tempted to load and load and load and load and reload to make sure it went perfectly. Especially in like a Hitman game where you are docked at the end of the level for being spotted or being somebody being suspicious or whatever. And that can be just I think some players just cannot get past that, and it becomes a not fun game for them. And that makes sense. I get that. I have been stuck in those loops myself. So anyway, Okay, go on.
I was gonna say I do think in Hitman does a good job of trying to avoid it. Obviously, you can't really control what your players do, but the individual mission nature and the replayability of the actual mission, I think, does a good job of encouraging people to just finish, learn some stuff and then try again.
Yeah.
Right, rather than just start over, because of the way like the progress works or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. It is built around, your rating and your rewards for that rating and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it encourages you. It's like, hey, you did this, but you didn't do it right. Like
Right.
you could do a lot better.
Right.
And maybe
By the way,
you'll find fun things.
Just watching some Hitman, like it does work quite well in most cases, but if you look at speedruns, it's really funny how unrealistic some of the NPC behaviors are, which is again very similar to single player. Like I think in one of the first missions, like you can get a silent assassin, which is the highest rating by like, so you're in a ballroom with like 50 other people and your target walks into the ballroom. You get up, you're the only person that gets up, you walk out the door, you hide behind a pillar, you shoot the chandelier falls down on the target, but no one suspects you because they didn't see you shoot it. But but if you think about it in real life, it's like, okay, there was one person who got up out of the ballroom and left out of 50 people who were just sitting here, and then mysteriously the chandelier fell down.
And they're not even doing a search of the grounds.
Yeah, like, did you see any suspicious, sir? No, it's a total coincidence. This guy just got up and ran out the door, and then the chandelier fell down.
Yeah, unrelated.
Totally accident.
Unrelated events. Yeah, I mean, if you don't play games, I mean, I don't know why you'd be listening to this, but so-called AI in games is not human-like.
Right. It's
not smart. Like people, I mean, it's smart in ways, but it's not smart in the way like a human player would be. It takes shortcuts to make the game feel real, but it doesn't. It's not like a person. Different, 5 people are chasing you down.
And I think part of it is the shortcuts. I think a big part of it is they behave in very deterministic ways. Right? They have very simple rules that they follow. Both the game and the NPCs in them, they follow very simple deterministic rules, as in like there's no randomness to the rules. Like you can understand, okay, like if they hear a gunshot, which means if there was a gunshot within the circle of them, then they hear it, and if not, they don't hear it. And I think a lot of that is because it would be very frustrating if that wasn't the case, right? Because something would go wrong and the player would be like, why did it go wrong?
I mean, all this stuff is tuned to be fun, right? Like it's
exactly
to say it's never realistic. Like there are realism fun things you can do, but they're more like movie things.
in
a lot of cases. But
by the way,
they want in single player, the game wants you to have fun and win.
They want you to sort of, it's, if you should think about NPCs, I think, as like they're like a backdrop. They're like a little button you can hit, right, for something. They should not be thought of as people. They're like the game is like a cruise and you are the hero of the cruise, and the NPCs in the game are not the other people. They're like the bathroom on the cruise, and like
they're designed to make your experience more fun and interesting, right?
Which is why you should not feel bad about stealing from them, probably. Even
although some people do.
Game tries to make. Yeah,
some people do.
One thing, which is if you wanted the Hitman experience, what the Hitman experience would be like if the NPCs were realistic, would be like Among Us or Mafia, where
this is the thing, right? Like single player games want you're a super thief, you're
exactly.
Who's a super thief? Lupin the Third.
Sure. Yep. Valera Singleplayer.
You don't know that guy? You don't know that?
No.
You don't know that character?
I have no idea what that is.
Zorro? No, he's more of a freedom fighter guy. All right, whatever.
Anyway, I was gonna say, if you want him to be realistic, it would be like Among Us, where you're just walking around and someone's like, "Hey, you're acting mighty suspicious over there." It's like, what did I do? And they're just like racist or something. You're just like, I don't know, you're suspicious. Lynch him. And then they kick you out.
Yeah, I mean, multiplayer is a totally different. When you're against humans, you're doing a whole It's a whole different thing. And not only are they smarter, they're also dumber and unpredictable. And
Right.
and you
The
never
unpredictability is sort of the main. That's the main frustration with dealing with humanity in general, right? It's just like,
yeah, we have emotions. We have visual illusions.
I mean, some of
an audio.
you guys have emotions. I don't know.
Yeah,
How those
not Regal. He's a stone cold Terminator
Yep.
logic guy. But some of us men cry, Regal.
I also
So
cry
Regal's also
when I cut
cry.
onions.
Ah, damn it, got me.
I'm just kidding. I actually cry quite a lot, actually.
So with multiplayer games, interesting that you've talked about this because yeah, there are social deduction games like you mentioned, like Among Us, and there are examples of stealth multiplayer games like Assassin's Creed multiplayer, but there's not a lot of like Hitman style or Thief style games that where it's like an asymmetrical sort of thing that pits a thief or thieves against human guards, police.
Among Us? I think you're describing Among Us.
No, you're not. You're not robbing a bank in Among
Okay,
Us or whatever. You're
Wait.
not stealing stuff. You're just going around pressing buttons until somebody gets caught.
Right. Well, I think the answer is very simple, right? And I think you would probably have already come to the same conclusion, which is it's really not fun to play the guard in many cases.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Just
It's like for it to be fun for the thieves. You would not have the powers you need, or you do have the powers. Yeah, like what would you do? Look at security footage, or
Right.
run around and shoot people, like, and try to find people acting strange, I guess.
And
there
they're,
are
like-
games like that. They're just not that popular.
there are games like this, but there has to be a lot that has to go right for the game to be fun, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, Five Nights at Freddy's is that, but it's nothing about thievery.
There's
or
multiplayer
steal,
in
right?
that?
No, I mean you're a guard.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that's
yeah, I
it.
mean, but
That's
that's
all.
a whole different
That's
premise.
the only it's a totally different premise and idea.
But yeah, you don't want to like fucking just patrol a art gallery for an hour until
Right.
the other players show up,
unless
right?
it's a horror game, right? But again,
Yeah, I
in
mean, if you can set traps and stuff, like put
Right.
up tripwires and shit like that, maybe that could be fun. So I think there is and if you are swapping every round, so it's not just,
Right.
I got to be stuck with guards. I think there exists a game that has not been created or I'm not aware of. Please tell me if it's out there, but where there is multiplayer teams probably with thieves versus cops or whatever, or guards. Or maybe it is maybe it is totally asymmetric. I don't know.
Yeah. See, I think the thing with multiplayer is it becomes a very, very different game when you expect there to be a thief. It
Yeah,
becomes very
and
different for
it's-
both sides, right?
And you're going to take out the fun of slowly making a plan and
Right.
executing it because that is boring. You're going to be sitting around if you're some of the players.
Right.
And it'll probably just then boil down to people find the strategies that are fast.
Yep.
And it's probably doesn't have some of the fun that you get in a Hitman game where you're sort of just scoping out the place for half an hour.
So I think maybe the only example that we can really come up with is like thievery in stealth game or not in survival games, right?
Survival
or
games
in like
and
GTA
MMOs.
5.
Yeah,
online or
GTA 5
whatever.
is a good one.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is more like you just,
A lot of that
dome
stuff's
the
like
other guy
role-playing.
and steal his
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, if you role play that is true. It could be something else. But yeah, I want to talk about a couple of those examples. And when we talk about how the game reacts to it, there's how the players react to it, and there's also how the powers that be, the devs, react to it. Like, there are some games where it's like, oh, this guy fucking scammed me or took advantage of some way to steal something out of my game house or whatever. I want a refund, and they have to decide like, oh, do I give all their stuff? The devs have to decide, do we want to just give all their stuff back and say this is bullshit, this is not part of the game, or do we want to say, well, sorry, that's just kind of how the game goes? Like, isn't EVE Online kind of like that? They're not
sure EVE
refunding
Online.
people's shit when
But
it
I
gets
did
blown
play
up.
The one game I have played, this was a very, very long time ago, that had like fully player run economy was Achaea, which was the online mud from
Oh,
forever
okay.
ago.
Yes, you've told me a little about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the early
Um,
MUDs had shit. It had more stealing in them
right.
before they just decided it was too much of a pain in the ass.
And the way I think I would think about it is like, I mean, we have to start. I think we have to start with real life, right? Because these games have enough agency that you have to at least think about it that way. Which is, okay, so in real life, if someone comes to your house and steals something, what do you do? Like, what do you expect to happen? I mean, well, you probably have some kind of insurance, and then you can go to the police, right? I mean, the police
Yeah.
probably won't do anything,
Yeah,
but
they'll come over and look around and say, "There's nothing we
yeah,
can do."
yeah.
A couple
And
days later.
okay, I mean, that's sort of that exists because um, there are systems in place by the government, which is a nice corollary for like the game, the game developers, right? Who like have control over what the rules are and how you can be protected from these things happening, right? We expect that they happen. We have police that can investigate if it gets really bad. And we have insurance, so that you,
Yeah, like if you it more it's you get more results probably from if you have the money for insurance. But the
right,
yeah.
right. I actually don't know how. Like, I know you have like you're supposed to have renters or homeowners insurance that covers your stuff, but I don't exactly
hmm
know how that works if you get something stolen. Anyway,
Yeah,
uh,
I have that. You take a picture and you gotta like I got it for my bank. You gotta like take a picture of all your
yeah.
shit and upload it, and uh, you file a claim if it happens, and they
Yeah.
sort of decide whether or not you're full of shit.
Which, by the way, is the other thing. The reason it's
And how much you paid
difficult,
for.
yeah, the reason it's difficult for the game to just decide, hey, let's just give a blanket refund every time someone, because like it actually doesn't cost them anything, right? They get it for free
Yeah,
at a
they
high
just
level.
have to pay somebody to push the buttons to do it.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, why don't we just refund everyone? Was because this is a scam vector, right?
Yeah,
Just like
yeah.
insurance fraud.
So it's
Um,
kind of like, do you allow scams? Like, uh, and I think early games allowed more opportunities for scams, but I guess I probably the new ones do. I just don't know.
I
But
mean, they look different than they used to. Things
so
like
I okay.
two-factor authentication or like irregular login detection or whatever. Like games have gotten smarter about, hey, you're logging in from Russia. That's weird. That's not normal. And then they
Well, and
block your account or
there's
whatever, right?
just like it could be scams where you're like hacking or what have you, but
Yeah.
or it could be just social manipulation stuff where you're like
Right.
tricking
Right.
somebody into transferring something.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think those, just like in real life, those sort of get decided on a case by case basis, right? Where it's
yeah.
like, this type of thing is totally okay, and that type of thing is uh, just user error to such a degree that we're not going to do anything about it or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And did you have an IKEA example you wanted to?
I don't think I looked much into the actual thievery or stealing stuff in IKEA because there was this thing called a flame sigil that you could put on items and then no one could pick them up ever, including yourself. So
Did you have to like
I think people
pay
just
for them or whatever?
I think you could craft them somehow. They were like
Mm.
a common tool that you could use. Anyway, I think the main idea was like all the decorations and stuff that you put inside your house, you would just make immovable, so no one could actually steal
Right, so
them.
they can't swap snatch them.
Yeah,
And then there's that reminds me. There's also earlier games when you died, your body would like sometimes people could just loot your body
yeah.
before they stop that because it sucks.
I mean, you can still do that in like RuneScape. It
Yeah,
depends on sort of what the idea is.
yeah. So you have to be careful about what you carry, and
Yeah.
sometimes you can't.
That's
So
fine.
I want to tell a story
Okay, go.
about a game, Sierra Online's The Realm. Was an early, I guess it's kind of like a graphical mud, but it was an early MMO adventure game kind of thing. They hadn't, it was 2D. It was all 2D, no 3D graphics yet. It was early internet, you were modeming dial up into that shit.
Hmm.
And in the early days, I remember this was when internet, I mean, it probably does for some people now, but internet cost you per minute or per hour just to be online, to be connected to this game. I paid, $50 for it in the first place. And now I'm paying, once I ran up a bill for $300 in 1 month, I got a big talking to. I was a very privileged young man. Yeah. But anyway, this game, The Realm, everyone, it's a fantasy RPG. It's sort of like, World of Warcrafty orcs and goblins and caves and towns and armor crafters and shops and shit like that. But everybody had a player house. Every single player, every single avatar toon had a house. And not only did you have it did not exist in the wider game world. You just go to like an innkeeper and say, hey, I want to go to this person's house. And to that point, it's not just your house you can go to. You can go to anyone's house, and they do not have to invite you for you to go to their front yard. They do not have to invite you. You just have to know their name, and that's it. They don't even necessarily know you were there. And there were sort of security measures that could be taken. So in The Realm, you had 3 screens in your house. You had the front yard. You could invite people over for a barbecue or whatever. You had the inside room, like the main living room. And then you had the back room, like your bedroom. And this is where your dedicated strongbox was. So you had a big ass treasure chest, bottomless treasure chest that had a password on it. Mm-hmm. So if you can get that password and you can get into somebody's house, you can get all their shit that they are not carrying on their person. There are no banks. All their gold is in there. Millions of gold could be, depending on who you rob. You never know how big the score could be. So there's all, and on top of that, there was an invisibility spell and a detect invisibility spell. But if you did not have detect invisibility cast, you were totally invisible to them. They did not know you were on their lawn, for example. Mm-hmm. Plus, there was a bush to hide behind in the front yard.
Sure.
So even not invisible, you could not be seen. Even detect invisibility, you could not be seen. So for me, this game was a dedicated thievery house robbing game. Best game I've ever played. Best MMO I've ever played.
Okay.
And interestingly, so we talked about how it would not be fun to be the person being robbed or being the security guard or whatever.
Okay.
Which it probably isn't. But if they don't know that you're trying to rob them, their game is, they're not doing any sort of gameplay other than if they catch you there, they can like right click on you and say evict and it kicks them out.
Right.
But for me, I can still do some of that long-term boring stealth shit that I like. So you could do literally just stakeouts at people's houses and wait. There's a password on their door, but when they open it, there is a window in which someone else can run in before they can load the next screen and close it and lock it, which is insane, right? Same with the strongbox. There is a window of opportunity. When they have it open, you don't need the password. You can just open that shit. Or you can just look in and grab stuff. And if you're invisible, their stuff will start disappearing from the like strongbox window of all their stuff. And they'll be like, oh shit, someone's here. Evict, evict, evict. Mm-hmm. And when I first started,
you have to do it when they're opening it or when they're using it.
So yes, if they open it while you're in the room invisible, you can walk up to it and grab stuff. Or what I got into in the later years was you can figure out what that password is. Or just tricking people into opening it and not thinking about you being invisible. Well, so, okay. So there's one layer deeper I want to talk about.
Okay.
Which is scams. So I used to run a scam that was based around a duplication glitch. We love. we love dupe glitches, don't we, folks?
Yep.
When you can make it 2 items out of 1, or 99 out of them out of 1. But my scam was I basically did all this esoteric shit to dupe something that they put into their strongbox. Part of the esoteric steps for them to duplicate the item that they put into their strongbox, one of the steps was they had to log out and log back in. During which time I ran to their open strongbox and put in a second of whatever they put in to convince them that it worked. Because for them to do that, they're not stupid. They're not going to leave all their shit in there while they do that. They took out all their valuables, put it in maybe another character's strongbox that I don't know about, or maybe carried it on their person, and then did this thing. And basically whatever it was, I was carrying a ton of gold and a ton of common items. Didn't need to be that lucky to be like, all right, what they put in, I can just duplicate it right now, put it in there. And, enough people were convinced. We're like, oh shit, it works. And so I'm like, great, enjoy that, do it, have fun. Then I'm invisible, or hopefully I find a way to hide in their house, or otherwise still have access to their house, while they just, right after that, one guy in particular, right after I showed him it worked, he did it right again in front of me with all of his gold. He put his total gold in there. I went in, snatched it. He has no recourse. It's over. Like, I have his shit. Anyway, some of the most fun I ever had. Do you have any comments? I feel like I've been talking for 15 minutes.
I have some comments. So is that similar to thievery for you? The idea of scamming?
It is. I think getting it over on somebody like that, it's different. Mm-hmm. It's not, I don't know that I'd want. I think tricking people is its own fun in single or multiplayer. And I mean, it's griefing people to a certain level, I think.
Well, I mean, there's obviously a lot of fun in that, as we can see from every MMO that's ever existed. But I don't think there's, in some context, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Would you get the same excitement if you did it to an NPC, though?
No, for sure.
Not even close,
I wouldn't.
Right?
I think it would be really fun. I'd like a game that was all that kind of thing, where you have well-written dialogue options or something that gets you to manipulate people, or charisma rolls or what have you.
I mean, that a charisma roll, I think, especially seems rather lame in comparison, right?
Too random.
I feel like well, it's not even random, but you're not like I would guess that the what's fun about scamming people essentially is sort of the elaborate setup and then watching it come together, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you're just, instead of replacing that setup with like a roll, a lot of that goes away.
Yeah, and when I think about those big successes, or hell, even the big failures where I'm like, I'm close, but they catch me. I remember my heart was racing. I was full body sweats. Like this was like an emotional experience, physical and emotional experience.
A spiritual experience, perhaps.
And getting away with it, I was riding high for a few days. Like, oh man, that was fucking fun. I fucking robbed. I got all the shit that this guy has spent 5 years collecting.
Unlucky.
And I would probably feel worse about it these days, but back then I didn't give a shit. I was like, people on the internet are assholes anyway, and it's just a game. Get over it, pal.
Fair enough.
But I did, while I relished their DMs and their chiding DMs were saying, "Sir, you have no honor. You will someday you will learn that you are true evil," kind of shit. I love that. And then they'd also put bounties on you. Like they'd go into the general chat and say, what, this such and such is a fucking scammer, a house robber. Do not deal with him. I will give you 100,000 gold if you fucking kill him or get my shit back. And of course, if you don't leave town, nobody can attack you. So before I did any dedicated robbing, I would get all the experience I needed so I could get the invisibility spell and and shit like that,
Just hang out in town.
and then never leave again. And
Yeah.
and people would come out of the woodwork, randos, and say, hey, want to party up and go out into such and such dungeon? And that never happened before. It doesn't. People don't just randomly approach you on the street, quote unquote,
Right. Right.
and say, "Hey, pal, you want to? I could enchant your armor for you." So and I'd say, "No, thanks, man." Or I'd say, "Yeah, I'll meet you out there," and then just not go.
So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I think a large part of it is that's sort of pulling off a heist in some way in a more using like social skills, right? Essentially, rather than physically sneaking into a bank. But I think
there is
core,
a sneaky component though, like
yeah,
just maneuvering your little character on the screen so he's hiding behind architecture has like a finesse to it.
Right. No, that makes sense. I think that would be like, so here's the thing, right? That can only exist, unfortunately, in a game where people don't know that that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right. It's sort of like in real life, like so.
Well, over time, people did know that there are robbers out there.
Right.
I mean, I wasn't
people
the only
get
one.
more aware, right?
I was in like a thieves guild I had several friends, so
that's funny.
Who would be like, sometimes if somebody left their door open or whatever, we would spam the group and say, hey, this door is open, get over here now so we can clean out the place, because it takes time to pick everything up.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
And we'd do stakeouts together too, and like do shifts to just
but anyway, yeah, that can only happen because people are not, or because that's not the focus of the game, right?
It's
like
not. It's an offshoot of another feature they were trying to make.
Right. You can imagine that, much like in real life, if people know it, like if the whole game is built around trying to scam someone or steal something, people are going to be much more aware of that.
Yeah. The system was for having people over and role playing and
exactly. Which is why it's hard to make a game, especially with other people, specifically to fill this desire, right? Like you can't really design a game only around tricking other people, because then the other people will know that the game is about tricking them.
Yeah, you would have to do something, a grand scheme, like sell one game that sounds totally unrelated to another game that has multiplayer connection to it.
Right.
And you don't know that that's what you're getting into.
Right.
But it's like, people would hate that, right? Like,
I think
I got robbed. Like, what the fuck?
Right. I think more realistically, it would happen exactly like it did in The Realm, which is like some MMO that already has this thing just adds a feature where you can steal the people's stuff. But of course, no one wants that, right? Like that's not.
Yeah. And the community finds ways to like police it, and over time, the game made more and more features to make it harder to do that. Like, they didn't want that. And sometimes, no, you know what? They didn't refund. They did still. What made it great is they still made it like, if you get scammed, sorry, man, you got scammed. Like, they didn't refund you for it.
Because that opens it up to basically the insurance scam, right? It's called insurance fraud in real life. If you try to do that, where you say that you got scammed, please refund me my stuff, but
and then they'd have to decide what's real or not, right?
Yeah.
Which is fraud.
Which is why a lot of games don't do that. I have one more thing I was going to say. So the reason, right? So because it's so hard to make a game targeted towards achieving that feeling, I think you would have to do it with NPCs.
Right? I think so too.
You have to find some way to make an NPC feel like a real person enough that it still feels at least somewhat satisfying. Probably won't be the same, but to like pull one over them one way or another.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
one more thing. Like,
okay,
there could exist. Maybe it's too crazy too. Like,
well,
so Watch Dogs. The game Watch Dogs has an asymmetrical multiplayer thing where you at times you don't know, like at times you are not alerted to, suddenly your game worlds will mesh with someone else. And they are now running around on the same map, but neither of you necessarily know it. They may know it. This is also in Dark Souls. Although they do tell you you've been invaded. Never mind. Watch Dogs, they don't right away until they try to hack you. Basically, they see you, they hack you, and they are stealing your money, and you have to figure out where they are. They hacked you in line of sight, so you have to figure out where they are and which NPC they look like and stuff like that. So you know that's going to happen, and you can opt out of that kind of gameplay, but you know it's going to happen, and it is kind of fun when I played it, because sometimes you do catch the other person. So I just... Maybe there is some game where... Again, I guess it would have to be just like a side element of... This is a side feature where you have house robbing or whatever. Or Metal Gear Solid 5, you could do that. You could do base robbing, essentially, where you're trying to get to their nukes and steal them. Or disarm them, and all of their NPC guards that they've made and all of their infrastructure and traps is there. So yeah, I guess there is that, and that is
I think that has one. I didn't know about the Watch Dogs feature. That sounds
and if they're online,
about as close as you can get.
And if you rob them when they're online, they can show up as Solid Snake and come and find you too. So that shit's fun. I guess I that was really cool, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. Like I want to be stealing your vases and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. But...
Yeah, I mean, I think I would guess that those features didn't get a ton of traction.
No.
Probably.
No. Because they're asymmetrical, weird, non-action shit.
Right. It's pretty hard to get that many people that want to do that also want to play the goalie. Right.
Yeah.
That's
and
I think.
And I think that's why the Metal Gear idea is good. Like you have a base that you've set up. You don't have to be there necessarily. Right. And you're not going to lose so much progress that it's like, what the fuck? Like, I'm done with this game. You can't get rage quit robbed. And that means that as the robber, you're only going to get so much as well. Or it's, they tell you got more than they actually took from the other guy, sort of thing. But if you know that, it's going to be, again, less fun, right?
There is sort of like the social element of robbing a person sort of, it's very difficult to make that fun for both sides, obviously, right? In real life, it's only fun for one person or no.
But people. I mean, and so I guess with combat, for example, the way they make it fun is you feel very balanced.
Yes.
And it just seems there's how do you balance something where you're sneaking around unseen and stealing things from the other person while they are unaware that you are doing it? It's just, it's just not balanced.
The point is that it's imbalanced, right? It's a totally asymmetrical, which I think is a good word, experience. And that's hard to get people to dedicate their free time to.
I mean, or you do what asymmetrical games do, is there are rounds and you switch on and off, I
will say one thing, which is the stealing in multiplayer kind of points out this problem, I think, where one of the things that shows up in like post-apocalyptic media that I find really annoying is that everyone becomes very violent when there's no resources. But and everyone becomes... Right, everyone becomes very criminally. Now, well, first of all, I think I may have mentioned to you at some point in the past couple months, like the studies have shown pretty clearly that at least in the aftermath of a like some kind of emergency event or cataclysmic event, like a mass evacuation or something like that, the vast majority of people that come from, I think the studies almost all focus on like developed countries. So like relatively, like above the poverty line or well-off countries like Western Europe or the U.S. or something like that. Anyway, the studies...
Not everyone is in constant need, basically.
Right. Not everyone is used to fighting for stuff, right? Everyone is used to like, hey, I need bread. I'll just go to the store and pay with my credit card. Have money out for my job.
The trappings of civilization.
Right. Anyway, the vast majority of studies show that in these cases... the studies show that in the vast majority of these cases, in these kind of emergency situations, people collaborate rather than like trample each other and fight and like try to murder each other for bread.
That's cool. I do think a major factor though is what is the perceived continuity of the government or normalcy or civilization. So if you're like, oh, the White House just blew up and the military all deserted. And
why would the military all desert?
Because, I don't know, the zombies overwhelm them. They want to go back to their homes. And
it seems unlikely. But
yeah, it does seem unlikely. You're right.
the military, the zombie apocalypse thing is a whole other discussion. I think zombies are like a -5 out of 10 in threat level in reality.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a multiple emergence, quick emergence, fast zombie situation where
so let me give you the most extreme emergency zombie scenario, right? And
or airborne shit.
Like all of the top. So first of all, I think we can agree like unarmed civilian zombies are not scary, right?
Nah.
Like unarmed.
No,
okay, so let's say
blow them all up right away.
Let's say a country's entire military, right? There's a virus that infects the country's military, a whole country, like one of the world powers military. They still know, for some reason, they still know how to use all their weapons and guns and tanks and intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
And they all become zombies and they attack another country. Okay, so this is known as an invasion.
Vampires.
So they don't have to turn to zombies. They just have to get the order to invade a neighboring country. So this is called an invasion, a military invasion. So in the very most extreme zombie scenario is just one country invading another country with their full military power. This happened last year, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So that's the now you can say, okay, so what if every military
so why
became
are you
zombies?
saying why is it worse if they're dumb and can't use guns or slow? Like,
right.
It's not. It's always going to be easier than that
if you
invasion.
Right. Because like they don't have to turn to zombies, they can just choose to invade another country. So
what about a country that is invaded or nuked? What if you're nuked and then invaded and your government is gone?
Okay,
how do people react then?
So that also happened. That happened.
I guess the other country will probably move in and establish
the other
order.
country annexes your country basically, right? And they take over. So what and then the other case is like a mass zombie outbreak, right? But I think that's the least scary because again, unarmed civilians are not a threat. Like, civilians marching in Area 52 is not a threat.
No.
Right? That's not a real thing that can destabilize any government.
Right. Zombies are not. Yeah.
Right. So at the end of the day, it's like either there's just mass extinction, like whether or not you turn to zombies, everyone dies. If enough people turn to zombies, it's a threat because they're all zombies, which is equivalent to being dead. Right?
So a meteor hits the world.
Okay.
And it also releases spores that kill 99% of the population.
Okay. So mass extinction is obviously very possible.
Then maybe civilization would break down in some cases, right? Or would we
Yellowstone,
still band together?
Well, Yellowstone perhaps could also cause that. I don't know how
super
realistic
volcano.
Yellowstone.
But it's like, wouldn't other countries like come over and say like, oh, well, I guess you're talking about like a nuclear winter type.
Sure. Well, in any case, when there's sort of an apocalyptic event, I think the reason it's unrealistic for everyone to become violent is that there's nothing to steal. Right?
Like if the world is, but people will still be driven to survive, right? You're talking about like,
so
we know
how
the
do
world
you,
is
so
over.
yeah, so how do you survive? So the world has, so infrastructure is gone, right? You don't have a job or a credit card or a grocery store anymore, right? So how do you survive? So I think for some reason, writers immediately think, oh, well, you survive by just taking a gun and shooting someone and taking their stuff.
Yeah.
But that doesn't actually, if everyone does that, you shoot someone and they don't have any stuff, they just have another gun. So now you have two guns.
Yeah, but
in order to steal.
But someone could establish like, a warlord situation where it's like everybody's living in shit, but we still have order, quote unquote, but it's
Okay, so
hell.
so let's flesh out the hypotheticals. Okay, so that's very realistic. Someone becomes a warlord, right? They become a dictator. But why do people agree to join this group? For example, why do people agree to pay protection money, right? It's because they establish order by providing two things, right? They provide some kind of security
Hmm.
and they allow you to survive, whether it's in bad conditions or good conditions, right? Maybe it's slave labor, for example.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you may just be rounded up.
Yeah, that's fine. Um, but what is the purpose of the warlord like domain? It still has to be to provide a renewal. It has to be to recreate society in some way. In other words, right? You have to grow food at some point. You
Hmm.
can't basically you can't grow food by stealing food. At some point,
Yeah, but I
somebody has to
mean,
grow
but
food.
it's still like you said. I mean, why is that's not civil? That's not a nice place to live. Like if you're a slave labor or whatever.
Well, why do you have to be a slave laborer though? So
Because the people who have the guns or who are in charge, who don't have any outside policing on them, can be like, oh well, I'm gonna take 90% of everything. Me and my
okay,
guys.
so let me ask you a question. So at some point, those people existed. They were called kings, and we had a system called feudalism.
Well, there's
Um,
warlords out in desert and open
they work
non-policed
in very
places
different ways, right? Those
like
people can
ISIS and
exist.
shit.
Those people can exist by stealing because there's stuff to steal, right? Because we have society that has stuff for
Oh,
them to
because they're
steal.
they're raiders
Yeah,
basically.
like raiders can only exist when there's enough civilization to support them, right? Like,
But they are. But there are. Hmm, they are out there. There
yeah,
are
they are.
some,
But I will say,
and they
but
they
at some
exist for
point
a
that was
while when war happens or whatever too.
right. Yeah, because there's stuff to loot and there's stuff to steal. So the fastest way to do that, like, it's much faster to, if you live in the lawless zone. So the reason raiders don't exist in Tennessee is because the police will show up and arrest them,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
The reason raiders can exist in like bombed out Ukraine or like the Congo is because the police will not show up in fact,
Right.
they become the police. They might be the police, right? They
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
show up and raid something. Uh, at some point, but to go back a little bit, is that at some point in history, the warlord said, "Hey, I have the guns. I have the army follows me for whatever reason. I'm I'm going to have I'm going to take 90% of everything and also have the honor of first blood, and you're stuck to your land and you're working it for me and nothing happened." This is called feudalism, right?
Hmm.
And those people were called kings. So what changed? What caused that system to change and become, the perfect picture of democratic society that we have today with no problems?
I guess revolutions. People had to
Some
eventually
amount of revolutions.
stop them, but some of it just evolved into. Well, I mean, there's something to be said of like what is the right level of your lower classes or middle classes happiness and comfort
Right.
that maximizes your safety living on top with most of the resources and minimizes the everyone wanting to kill you factor.
Right. Exactly.
Like a warlord has to watch their back and be guarded at all times because everyone wants to fucking kill them, and
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
yeah,
It's some combination of all those factors, right?
just like a
Like,
king. Yeah.
right, just like a normal king. At some point, most people decided that that was not good, and we slowly started getting more and more democratic. In a few places in the world, we're getting less democratic. But there's basically the point I'm making is that the political what's the right word? The political nature of the entire world is not any different now than it would be in an apocalypse, right? There would still be the same exact pressures. We would just potentially, one possible outcome is we would like go back in time 300 years and have like slave labor and peasants and like martial law and executions, right? But that's not
That
that's not
sucks.
somehow, yeah, it does suck, but it's not somehow, but I also think the that may not happen just because people will want to recreate the society they were just living in, Right. So if we start with
I would think so. I think the more people you have to do that, the less we are separated, the less we are isolated. I think because
right.
you look at this tiny island
Yeah.
nations and shit like that, and they do turn into weird sex cults. That they
not only the ones that are publicized, right? There's plenty of normal rainforest tribes and
sure,
non-island nations.
Totally.
Yeah,
you're right. You're right. They're totally great. You're right.
Not everyone is.
But I'm just saying it can
island?
happen, and
it can happen.
The fact that it can happen means that I am less likely to be disbelieving of The Walking Dead and Negan and shit like that.
Well, there are certain things that can happen, but I think it depends on the
point.
situation.
To your point, I mean, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, there is a fundamental thing I think that can't change, which is that in an apocalyptic scenario, you can't have everyone be a raider. That just economically does not work out, right?
No.
You can't have violence be the reason violence cannot be dominant for very long is because violence is fundamentally unproductive in a literal sense, as in it does not grow food. Right?
I mean,
you can't steal stuff.
Can.
Huh?
You got some people, you point guns at them and say,
well,
okay,
let me put it this way, is that you can't it can't cause raiding can't grow food, or stealing can't grow food, right? Or executing another person cannot grow food.
It can discipline your slaves who are growing the food.
Sure. I would say another thing, which is there's very little reason, because of the nature of guns, it seems unlikely to me that slave labor will be the end result. Just because, especially when the slaves
stop working.
Especially if the quote unquote slaves would also be educated, right? I think a lot of the reason feudalism existed because of the lack of education, right? In an apocalyptic scenario, everyone would come from already a educated society, essentially. And therefore, it seems unlikely that if you point a gun at someone and tell them to, be a slave, that they would not either, find a way to, it depends on, I guess you can think about how you would personally react in that scenario, right? If that happened, if it caught you off guard and you were unawares, that may affect you. But I think if you had time to repair, it seems unlikely that you would find yourself undefended and be susceptible to that.
I don't know. This is interesting, but it's also a real bummer. So should we move on to?
Okay, let's move on.
Back to thievery.
I had something to do with thievery. Oh, anyway, the whole endpoint that I think I've already said a couple times is just thievery is not, because it's not productive. It can only be fun in the scenario where there's already some kind of other productive stuff happening, right? Like a game where the only object is that there's a thief and there's someone stopping the thief, I think is much less rewarding because of
multiplayer still.
Yeah, multiplayer.
Okay.
It's much less rewarding because of all that stuff we just talked about. Because there has to be something meaningful to steal, right? Stealing the flag fundamentally is, I think, less exciting than stealing 10 years worth of gold from somebody, or
or art,
the actual
fine
heist.
art.
Yeah. And for those things to exist and have value, they have to come from a system that has a functional economy, in other words, right? And productive parts of the economy. If you're just stealing for the sake of stealing, it's much less rewarding because none of the stuff you're stealing has value because no one's producing anything. That was a very long-winded example.
That said, I still want the simulation, the single player simulation of
single player is totally different, right? Because single player you can just say whatever you want, and
it's you got 30,000 gold and now you can buy more lockpicks or whatever.
Well, also just the NPCs, because they don't have to be people playing them, you don't have to give them any goals. They can just pretend to live a normal life and you can just steal from them.
Right. Right. Having those gameplay types mix seems to always be an issue.
Yeah.
Unless you're me. All right, so we talked about all these systems and things. What else do we want to talk about? I mean, there is the can talk a little about the ethics. Like there
Yeah.
are oftentimes we talked about cops and like law enforcement uh, functions in games or systems in games, but there's also like there's sometimes tied to morality and how people in general view you. Sometimes it's like, oh, we know this guy got caught for thievery, and we're gonna charge him more money, charge him more for this, or people will be scared of you because you look more evil because you did evil things. Although
This
again,
is
a lot of
this is a single player, right?
yes, we're back in single player world. Like Red Dead Redemption has a system like this, which ultimately none of them are great. Like they all boil down to whether you're on all the way down to the left side of a meter or the right side of a meter, and
Right.
it's light or dark or whatever. Good
Essentially,
or bad.
it's people judging you based on your appearance and or your criminal record, right? Which is actually a big no-no in real life for a lot
I
of
mean,
reasons,
it is, but it's a no-no in our social contract, but people still do it, right?
Well, sure, that's true. I guess it's not even another sort of contract, but it is something that is known to be, and I think we will both agree, is not a good way to judge somebody in real life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, in on paper, our whole justice system is like, hey, once you've done your time, you're innocent
Yeah,
again.
that's funny.
You're a citizen. Like, we're not supposed to take that into account, but you can still on job applications you get that question like, have you ever been committed of a felony, and you have to answer it or potentially can get into more trouble.
Yeah,
And that
it shows
sucks.
on my
And you can't
background
vote
check,
if
right?
you're a felon, like
Mhm.
ever. Doesn't matter if you did your time, quote unquote. You're a second class citizen in many ways, and people
Mhm.
judge you also. They're like, well, he's a criminal though. Like you're a criminal for the
That's
rest of your
true.
life.
Yeah.
If you did one crime, accidental or not, or justified or not, for God's sakes.
I don't know if you can get a if it was like obviously accidental. I don't know if you would ever get a felony, but unless you like
Are you kidding
murdered
me? Are
someone.
you kidding
Okay.
me? Accessory to murder? Like
Okay.
the kid
Well.
who was standing there when the fucking shopkeeper got shot by the other dude you were with, who you didn't even know was going to happen, but you were there, and you're probably not white, and they're going to
Well. Yeah.
put you away for life. So,
Unlucky.
yeah.
I guess I
Unlucky,
was
yes.
excluding murder or other
Okay.
capital crime, but
Okay, no
because
murder. You
that's
mean just like
pretty
robbing
rare.
stuff?
Yeah, but
I wonder. I don't know.
like if you're like manslaughter, I guess that's also murder. Never mind. Okay,
yeah,
things that
violence
don't result
when
in
it's
death.
violent and it's
Yeah.
easier, people. I wonder though, like when do shoplifters, if you're a certain type of person that doesn't have the means to stop it, like how much are those people getting put away for? Like, are there felony shoplifting and thievery shit? Because
I don't know. I
that could do
can't say
it.
I've ever looked into it, but
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you talk to some of my conservative family, they say it's the most the biggest problem our country faces is shoplifting.
what?
The
What do you?
crime wave that's going on. They're stealing the deodorant at CVS.
I see.
No, I'm not kidding.
That's kind of funny. I mean, I believe it because
It's
You know,
it's
I-
hard, but I mean, it's like this is what the conservatives think about. Like, oh,
Yeah.
the black kid stealing a thing of deodorant or a
yeah. I mean,
or
I've
a
seen
shirt,
I've
for
seen
fuck's
Fox
sake.
News once or twice, but yeah, it's
Yeah, I mean that's what it is. Crime wave. A bunch of black guys on the screen.
What
Anyway,
was
what were we talking
I
about?
had something to say, but it seems unimportant. Oh, anyway, I do think the reason I say that about felonies is that I feel like at least in a lot of what I've seen, when a lot of times there's many ways to get a like quote unquote normal or like not mega serious crime pleaded down to a misdemeanor or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
For I guess for white people, I guess I don't know.
Yeah, it really
about
depends.
for
Can you
black
afford a
people,
lawyer
but-
that can get that? I don't
Yeah.
know. Do you know not to
Anyway.
talk to the police?
Yeah, or will they talk to you or will they kick your head in?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but I want to say one thing, and by one thing I mean another long thing about morality, which is morality is usually determined by harm, right? So for example, or perceived harm. So for example, when you scam somebody out of online goods that they earned over 5 years, like you did, you morally debased fiend that you are.
That's right. Yes. Okay. Right.
You don't go to jail for that, right? They can't file a police report and be like, hey, I spent 5 years of my life working on this thing, and like this guy stole it, like started an investigation. Now however, if it was perceived differently, they might be able to do that, right? If you go into someone's house and you take 5 years worth of wages.
Yeah,
right?
If we're talking about real life stuff.
We're talking about real money.
Pictures of gold.
Yeah, it's different, right?
Yeah,
that has some kind of like real value that has. So there is some, and people would treat those two acts very differently, right? Like one is like, like haha, this is an funny online game currency. Wow, you stole it from them. Nice job. And the other one was like, wow, what is wrong with you? Like, are you actually a criminal? Like, do you?
Yeah, this person
I'm
is
reporting
dangerous.
to the police.
Yeah.
And basically everything kind of changes depending on that perception, right, of how bad the thing you did is. And that how bad it is determined by like how much harm is perceived to have been done to the other person. It doesn't really have anything to do with you, right? It doesn't matter if you are a billionaire stealing $10,000 or if you're broke stealing $10,000.
No, that matters. Billionaires steal all the time and nobody gives a shit.
From a literal perspective, I guess. But
you mean the act? Okay.
Yeah, the actual act in itself. The reason, I guess that was a very bad explanation.
I gotcha.
But the idea is that like what really matters is how much harm you did to the person, right? When it comes to thinking about how bad what you did is, or how much is perceived to be.
I think, I think you're right. Yeah.
By society at large.
And I mean, there are the sorts of people that are like, you do the crime, you do the time. It doesn't matter your intentions or the circumstances. It's like Law and Order or whatever.
We refer, those are dogmatic people, right? Those are the Rorschachs.
And it's people who know they're never ever going to have to do anything that could get them in trouble. So they're like, they feel safe being like, oh, well, if you do it, you're in. I can't imagine I'd be myself doing that. So you must be fucking deviant.
Those are the people who live by the letter of the law, essentially, right?
But like, your point stands though. You're right. Like we judge a thing like, oh, somebody stole, a cookie from the cookie jar. Well, it doesn't matter as much as I stole this person's liver.
Right.
Left him.
There's all kinds of context that comes into it. So when we think about NPCs, we obviously,
if I remove the liver, there's no need for a bathtub of ice.
Well, that's also true.
Kidney.
Okay. Appendix, perhaps. Everyone wants appendices.
Steal their appendix. I like it.
So when it comes to NPCs, there's almost no point in considering them as people because you can't actually harm them, right? So when you're Link and you go into someone's house and you break their jar, the thing is they weren't using it, right? They're not capable of using it. They're not, and they're not really living a life outside of it anyway. They don't even perceive that it's there, or if they perceive that it's there, it just changes their dialogue or whatever, right?
Yeah, they may say, "Hey, get out of here," and like maybe a couple things in Zelda in a shop or something, but
right, exactly.
But it feels fun. It feels fun, and if anything, you're gonna laugh at the weirdness of the situation, like you being able to throw it at their wall right above their head and get the rupee out.
Right. But that's not the same when you steal from a person in a multiplayer game, right? That the stuff that you steal like had at some point some kind of use or value that no longer exists, right? Which is why we elevate it to a higher degree than stealing from an NPC, which obviously has no agency or ability to use that at all. So that's where, when you're thinking about like, should I feel bad for stealing from NPC? I think just objectively speaking, there's no reason to ever feel bad about doing so, right? Unless you're the kind of person that like you apply your real world perceptions to what's going on in the game. I think that's where
I think it's sort of like people who are more want to role play too a little bit maybe.
Yeah.
So I want to bring up an example. So I don't think we put up the video, but you played. I forced you to play Quest for Glory 1, and we robbed a couple houses, right? Like we went into the sheriff's house, and we also robbed a little old lady.
Yep.
Which is a very strange. When I couldn't believe it when I first played that game. Where you are ostensibly a hero. The game is called Hero's Quest or Quest for Glory, so you want to be a hero. You're a hero. But also at night, you can rob a little old lady and sell her pearls for gold and buy some more daggers or whatever.
Right.
To me, that's sort of like deliciously strange and fun, and like how strange, the games don't usually do that. There's a weird, like, okay, you're a hero, but you're also moonlighting for cash, and it's like, what's the harm? So a friend of mine who is more of a role player played the game, has been playing it recently through the whole series, and he was not able, he was like, I cannot, like, why am I gonna rob the sheriff? Like, why am I gonna rob this lady? Like, I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble almost. Exactly. Not only does it feel wrong, it feels like the game is probably watching me and going to get me in trouble. So maybe that could be maybe all of it, but whatever it was, he felt like, no, that's not the guy I'm playing. That's not me.
No, that makes sense. And role play, I think, is the perfect word for what's happening here, right? Because that's when you ignore the actual parameters of whatever the situation of the game is, and you take your preconceived ideas, whether it's about real life or about whatever time you're pretending to be, and you put them into the game, right? So the NPC is no longer an NPC; it's an actual person, like a human player.
Yeah, there's you build out their life a little bit in your head, and it and it makes sense that, I mean, games are you're bashing in people's heads as well. Like, if you get a little bit of story about who they are, you can be like, oh fuck, what the fuck am I doing? So yeah, but go ahead.
I was gonna say, so one of the ways I think a game, if it wants to, a game focused on thievery might not want to do this, but if you wanted to have a little more, trigger a little more of an ethical response in your player, one way to do this is to make the actions they do meaningful in some way, in the sense that, like, if you steal from an NPC, they are, the things you steal were actually going to be used by them. So I'll give a very simple example. So in Mountain Blade, the series, in both the first and the second game, you can raid villages, right? You're sort of like this knight / feudal warlord that's roaming around. If you raid a village, you can take their money and stuff. Obviously, these are NPCs, but as you raid a village, the village's wealth goes down, obviously, because you stole it. Shocking.
And it's part of your, like, holdings, basically.
Well, you would raid other people's villages, probably.
Oh, okay.
I actually don't even know if you can raid your own. Yeah, I don't know if you can raid your own villages. But anyway, if you raid other people's villages, there is an actual gameplay change that happens, which is that, like, the villages go down. The description changes to be like, oh, it's very poor. It has less goods. The people hate you. And, like, I think in some cases, I don't know if this is fully implemented, but, like, when you go and walk around the village, it's like burnt down and in disrepair, right? The more it's been raided, the lower.
So it's like you're being a dick. Like, you're having a real negative effect, consequences on the world.
Right. That's sort of the idea, right? When you have an actual consequence on the thing that you're targeting, it changes the morality, evaluation in the player.
Totally. Right? Like, if the little old lady in Quest for Glory loses her house after the next day, gets foreclosed on. Exactly. It's like, shit, I'm not.
On the other hand, when nothing happens, then people kind of learn that, like, this is not, like, why should this be immoral? Like, objectively speaking, nothing bad happens, so why should I not do it? It's like homosexuality, right? It's like, why do people keep telling me that homosexuality is evil? People keep doing it and nothing bad happens. So what is the problem? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. So another way that games, so the robbing innocent people and like looting innocent villages and shit isn't the usual for games. Like a Rockstar game might do that for being fun to like terrorize a place, but they typically make all of the NPCs you're terrorizing a little bit funny. Like they're like action movie, like, oh shit, the guy's got a flamethrower or whatever. Yeah. Instead of like, oh my God, my baby's dead and shit like that.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do? They don't have that. That's like, oh fuck, well, this is not fun anymore. Which is actually an element of games that is hard to explain to someone who never plays it and sees on Fox News, like the GTA, like, oh, you're just running people over, but they make it a little silly, Anyway, and they don't show the negative consequences. They don't show
because
like
there aren't
sad
any,
consequences.
Right?
What's that?
Because there aren't any. That's sort of the key difference that people have to understand, is that like not only are there not consequences in real life, obviously there are also no consequences in the game. Right.
So a good person could come in and play this game, let off some steam, and have a little fun, but be like, oh, there's no consequences. I feel no emotional like guilt for this.
And I shouldn't, fun. Because nothing happened, right?
Because nothing happened. I didn't hurt anybody.
It's different than it's even different than scamming someone in an MMO, right? Because then you actually had a consequence on a human being.
Yeah, you probably should feel guilty about that.
So, in many ways, the morality equation, it's not really about that it's in the game. It's more that, objectively speaking, there are no consequences. Like, there are literally no consequences because these are NPCs that don't exist, right? Until AI becomes sentient.
Yeah, and then how do you feel about artificial sentience? Do you see them as equals or not?
We'll save that for our artificial sentience episode in 2037.
No way.
See you then.
It's not happening in my lifetime.
That's certainly true.
There's no way. Or else these thief games would be better. Shoot, there's.
I guess that's an interesting idea.
Something I do want to bring up before we take that tangent is so most games will fix this. We'll fix this by making your target bad, like justified.
Yeah, sure.
Like you're a rich baron of some kind, or the corrupt captain of the guard in Quest for Glory 2. You rob him, or you rob assholes of shit they stole to begin with. Maybe I mean,
the little old lady is. You don't know her history, man. She's fucked up.
Yeah, she was a Nazi collaborator.
Yep.
You find that when you take her pearls. The bottom of her bag, she's got some documents with Castle Wolfenstein maps on them. Yeah. So, what were you gonna say?
At what point?
When I said, "Hang on, I wanna."
Oh, I guess it is important. I guess to say or to add to the idea that I guess there's some kind of trigger. Like, I don't like playing evil routes in games. Do you?
No, I prefer playing the hero. Yeah.
And it's more just because in order to prove to you that you're evil, like there's just a bunch of unpleasant dialogue that happens. At least in my opinion, unpleasant. Right?
Yeah, people in general, the characters are going to not like you, and that depends on what kind of person you are. But generally, people are like, that feels bad.
Yeah,
this is more like real life.
They're like you. There's going to be a bunch of stuff. This goes back to our previous conversation, I think, about like, Lara getting impaled in the neck is just like, I mean, I understand that this is not real and there's no consequences, but like, just
it's unpleasant to look at that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just unpleasant to look at it. So like in an evil route, when you're like executing someone, they're like begging for their life. It's just like, I mean, like this is just not fun to look at.
Yeah, and I kind of the sort of person you need to be is, or in my worst moments in my life, I'd be like, yeah, hell yeah, and like my worst, I'm angry at the world kid moments, maybe.
Yeah.
But generally, like, unless you're a real psycho, I don't know if you're getting. But I mean, some of that shit gets into games, and I wonder about the developers. Like, so early 3D shooting games, Wolfenstein 3D, Duke Nukem. Around the Duke Nukem 3D, phenomenon time, there was a game called Rise of the Triad. Excuse me. Rise of the Triad, where occasionally when you shoot enemies and don't kill them, they beg for their lives. They're on their knees and they're like, "No, please, God, I got a family, don't do it." And if you do nothing, eventually they'll fall over like they're dead, but they're not dead. As soon as you turn your back, they get up and shoot you again. So the game teaches you is like you have to execute all these people that are begging, because there is no mercy that is appreciated.
Right.
That's fucked up. I had to drop that game. But some people are like, yeah, that's just a weird, interesting part of the game, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I do think maybe we're even in the minority here. I just think a lot of people.
So?
Well, among people who play games, maybe not among
there's some angry people that want to burn down the world.
I don't even think that it's angry. I think people are just more able to, because I think what happens for us is that when we see stuff like that, it triggers some kind of actual emotional response, right?
Right. They know it's not real through and through.
It's not. Well, I guess that's true. I mean, it's obviously, we also know it's not real, right? But it's more like it's like when someone,
but they're able to separate that emotional element, I guess.
Yeah, it's sort of like a instinctive response. Like for some people, if you feign like you're about to punch them, they don't react at all, right? Or they're like not phased. And for some people, when you do that, they like freak out, they jump back, right? And
it's
most people are somewhere in between. Yeah. So I think it's more like they just don't have that kind of instinctive emotional response when someone's like screaming in pain. That's where it's like, oh wow, that's really unpleasant, and that like makes my heart rate go up, and like makes me tense up and makes my stomach uncomfortable.
I also think back to when I was younger, when I was like a teenager, and I did, or even younger than that, yikes. When I watched a lot of horror movies, like I took in action, shoot 'em up action movies and horror. I was I got pretty desensitized. Like that stuff didn't stand out as much, and I was just like, oh yeah, it's just and someone when you're gonna kill someone, they plead for their life, and
yeah,
that's what happens.
So, it is. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it is sort of just. It's honestly just like instinct or like genetics, I guess. Just like if you're built a certain way,
nature and nurture.
Yeah, that's true.
It reminds me of there's sort of a softer version of this. Games where Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the 3D one, Sonic Adventure 2, you at the beginning of the game you choose good team or bad team. But they're all, anthropomorphic, cute animals.
Right.
But I had friends who were like, no, for me, I was like, I want to be the good guys. I want to be the good guys. But I did eventually play both, and I was like, I'm fine with this. Right. But I did know people who were like, I just never want to, I don't want to be the bad guys, period. Yeah. And some guys who were like, oh, come on, don't be the lame good guys. Like, you gotta pick the bad guys. Come on. And they'd use worse words than that.
I think a lot of it, I think there is a disconnect in people between, because I think especially with that example, a lot of it comes down to how you perceive yourself, right? And your like persona that you try to project. Like, for example, masculinity is often connected to playing the bad guy, right?
Yep,
and femininity is often connected to playing the good guy,
or the good guy making the right decision by doing some bad stuff.
Right, exactly.
Shooting the purse snatcher in the back.
Yeah. So a lot of that has to do with what you project for yourself, but I also think a lot of it, like your enjoyment of, or like what you lean towards, I think is at its core connected to just your physical reaction, your emotional reaction when you see quote unquote good things or bad things happen or whatever.
Yeah.
Because like on the flip side, like people who see a really heartwarming ending and don't feel anything might be like, well, that was boring. I want to see some explosions or whatever.
Some regal types.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, the writers tricked me.
I love heartwarming endings, actually. Wow.
Oh, wait, what? You like what?
I love heartwarming endings, actually.
Well, how did they trick you into being heartwarmed?
Wait, what do you mean? You think I have no heart?
No, not that. I'm saying you said writers are always setting up improbable situations, and that makes it forced situations that are set up for maximum emotional impact, and that feels tricky to you,
Okay,
right?
but
Am I getting that
most
right?
happy endings actually are not forced because they, these are the emotion, these are like relationship based or emotion based endings. I mean, those are
Okay,
actually
you're
very
talking
not
about like
forced though,
that the
right?
two people are getting together at the end, or
Or just like, the power of, we formed a really strong bond over our
Mhm.
course of our adventures, and we're reminiscing on what good friends we are now or whatever. I mean, that
Yeah,
stuff is
okay.
not forced, right? That's like Tuesday,
Okay, you're talking
like
about like
Tuesday at the bar.
specific. You're talking about like plot elements that
Yeah,
are out of control.
yeah.
Okay. All right, cool, good. I'm
Or
learning
like
about
accomplishment,
Regal.
or just like the feel, because like, okay, I guess one more thing that is like that can also come at the ending when you've accomplished something, right? But the emotions that you feel are not necessarily tied to what you accomplish. It's that you accomplished something and like became friend along the way, big friend
Big friend.
or
Yeah,
whatever,
no, that's
right? And
nice. I
that
like
that
that
stuff
too.
that stuff is real, right? That stuff is like common and it's nice to look at, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah. I was just watching The Expanse recently. Do you know that show?
Sure don't. Is it about space?
It's about space. Good
Oh,
guess.
nice. I love
The
space.
Expanse out there. Yeah, it's years into the
Actually, I don't.
future where the solar system has begun to be colonized. Uh, we've started to terraform somehow
Hmm.
Mars, and there are settlements all over the asteroid belt that are mining it for the wealth of the inners, the Mars and Earth people who take all of it for themselves, even
Okay.
though the belters are so they're living a lower
Oh, I
class life
see.
out there.
I see.
Anyway, it's pretty interesting. I liked it, but I brought it up because because the relationships made me cry, and I liked it because
Yeah.
there's happy things. Okay, so there's a few other. Oh, one thing I'm recognizing here is I really like what seems to be the best fit in general gaming is games where you play a rogue. You can choose to be a rogue and have dedicated quest lines and skills that let me do side things that are thiefy. I would prefer that even the main quest really lets me do thiefy things. For
Hmm.
example, like I don't get the magical amulet by beating the monster. I stole it.
Hmm.
I broke in and I stole it and he never saw me. A lot of games don't build that because it's like it's extra features. It's like
Yeah.
it's a totally
It's a totally
extra
different
game.
feature. Yep.
Yeah. But that's I would certainly love it if a game was just that. But again, like generally you don't want to do that because you get fewer people playing it.
Right.
So yeah, we'll make some rogue side things. We'll have the Thieves Guild quests or whatever, but that's maybe 10 hours of content. It's not out of the
Right.
100,
Right.
and it's
I
never going to
th-
be more than that. It seems like.
I think there's some hope. I mean, in the current world we live in, there's a lot more space, I think, for, I guess you might call them like basically like $30 games that appeal to a very particular niche. I think we're seeing
Hmm.
a lot of those right now. And they're a lot of them are like well done. So I think there's some hope that there can be a
Yeah,
dedicated thief game that's like $30 and not a full Fallout world, but
and
has
maybe
compelling content.
I'm pretty sure that making a 3D game is still going to be way more expensive than making a 2D game,
Yeah,
right?
it's true. Yeah, no, it's
I
definitely
don't know
true.
how easy it becomes because just adding a dimension is so much more work. Uh, uh, so there is one example. There is a Quest for Glory fan game
Okay, I'm
called
listening.
Heroine's Quest that you may have seen me playing. I remember you commenting that you thought it was some sort of different kind of game when you saw the name, but it's just it's Quest for Glory except modernized a little bit,
Hmm.
but keeping some of the classic shit that a lot of people hate that I love. But you choose between a warrior, a magic user, or a thief,
Hmm.
and the thief they do a really good job of there's not just a couple of thiefy side things you can do. And, in Quest for Glory, you use rogue abilities and stuff. But in this, they really leaned more into the stealing stuff. So dedicated quest items that you could steal, sometimes from good people, you could do that. And as long as the townspeople never caught you, you're in the clear. But at the end of the game, or sometimes right away, or sometimes at the end of the game, they'll be like, wait a second, during the celebration ceremony for you, like saving the land, and they're giving you a big medal. This game has a bunch of branches where someone can be like, wait a minute, she stole my shovel from my house. And everyone's like, boo. And suddenly you're in getting pelted with tomatoes in the stocks or whatever. Which is really interesting to me. It's again, it has total heroism dissonance. Like,
right.
I mean, in some cases, stealing the quest item makes sense. Like, if it's the greater good kind of thing. But there are also plenty of targets for you to just fucking get some money out of people who, in daylight, are your friends even. So it's kind of fucked up, but I like that interesting dissonance.
That is sort of the path of a thief, right? I mean, fundamentally, you are supposed to be doing something illegal, unless you happen to not believe in private property. But,
Yeah, I mean, illegal, yes, but this game in particular, like, gives you immoral options.
Right.
And moral options.
Oh,
so you can choose what level of thief you want to be, which is a lot of fun. And some of the stuff I do feel like they make you feel bad about it. Like, the people will notice their shit's missing and be like, what the fuck? It sucks. And you feel, and you're like, maybe that wasn't good, but I did get thief points. So, it's weird. It's interesting artifact. I mean, there's probably a reason it's not in a lot of games, and this unknown $20 game, actually, it's free. You can give whatever money you want.
I see.
Which is insane. It's a great game. People should be paying at least $20.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation that I've been thinking about a lot recently. About how much games should cost and how we can price them better. I will say, what are the things you would like to see in a dedicated theming game? So what if you could walk through like a mission 17 out of 53, right? What would that mission look like for you?
Like in an ideal thieving game?
Yeah, in like a game, whatever kind of engine or context you want. Like what would you wish to be doing in the middle of the game?
Yeah, so I think there should always be a concept of loot and evaluation of how much loot you got. That is hidden and either scrounged or you figure out the combo to the safe, shit like that.
I guess let me make it easier. Let me give you like a setting to work with, right? Let's say it's like it's like, I guess I never played Cyberpunk, but I assume it's like Cyberpunk or like GTA 5, like a modern city, maybe more like skyscrapery, techie or whatever, to have more avenues of getting into stuff. And you are, let's see, what's a common trope? You are fighting against evil government.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or fighting against an evil government, and you're stealing documents or stealing resources of some kind, or stealing back something they took, for the people. I mean, that would be. I enjoy that more. Like if you're a hero, they find a way to make it that way. I like that fantasy. But you're asking like, what about it? I want to do.
No, yeah. What do you want to do on a mission? So like, what kind of target? What would the target look like? What would you be trying to steal? What would you actually do to get in and out? How do you succeed really well? How do you fail? Things like that.
So I like the idea of office complexes or mansions, things that are multi-leveled, have different layers of security, have many ways to approach, and may have many things hidden about. I want to search everywhere, essentially. I want to sneak around in ways that allow me not to be seen. It's fun to me if there are guards, there are security cameras, there are alarms that I can find ways to circumvent. I also want, ideally, a plan of entry and escape. Like, how am I getting in and having different options to do that? Like, Payday 2 has tried to do that. They don't always succeed, but like there's a window you can pick the lock on. There's a sewer system you can come up through. You can dress yourself up like a guard and go through the security entrance. That kind of thing. I like those role play options and to have them feel like they work. And then I like the what's the word? The showing the nuts and bolts of it. So the latest Thief game had an animation, for example, where when you steal art, it doesn't just disappear and you get a number that says 600 gold for this. There's a little animation of him taking out a knife, like a stiletto, and cutting it out of the frame and rolling it up carefully and like putting it in his pack. I like shit like that. Like I love that. I love lock picking mini games. That make you have some finesse to them. Whether that's like you have to hold the analog stick just so there's a little bit of balance or whatever involved. I like that sort of thing. Let's see.
Okay. I have some ideas. Let me run something by you. So if the first part, I think is really important, the idea that you have a actual complex or a large area, and there's multiple things in there, right? I think a lot of
and you're also you're finding a path through that you wouldn't be taking were you just visiting the place. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. So I think one of the frustrations people have, me included, with a lot of stealth games is that they're hyper linear, right? It's like, hey, look at this path that these guards take. You can only go this way, and then you have to go around them, right? They are super linear. There's no like exploration element, which I think I would also enjoy, like you said. And it's basically boils down to like a puzzle game, right? And it's like, how frustrated are you by the way the puzzle implemented?
I think an open world is the option with options and sections and things that you can go to in any order is important to my ideal game. Like I would like a rich neighborhood to be the whole world, where you can and approach different houses with different levels of security and different, this one's got guard dogs you gotta avoid or give meat to or whatever.
Right. Okay. So I have an idea. So let's say in this city you don't have free roam, but instead you have like a citywide map, and then you have like what's a good number? Like 32 different levels. Essentially they're levels, but they're like
targets.
This is the mansion, this is the office building, this is the final secret house or whatever. And the game is on there's like a time management aspect. So there's a timer. So you're trying to stop the evil government within 4 months or whatever, or 3 months or some amount of time, right? And so you're during the times when you're not heisting, you need to spend your money in order to get people with expertise to get around like certain checks. So like hacking or lockpicking or whatever. And then you need to hire those people or like learn from them or whatever. And then you need to also pay people to scope out these targets.
Yeah, so, you need something like this because you need to spend loot for it to be meaningful.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, you're just looking at a number go up.
So you scope out the targets with your people, and then every day that passes, you can choose to try to go to a target. The problem is, it depends on, you need to make a decision about, do you have enough, are you confident that you'll succeed? Do you have enough information about whatever? I think there has to be some system where maybe the defenses are random. Anyway, so it's
or maybe if you succeed but get caught doing it, right, some other targets get a little harder to rob or something.
Right, exactly. And I think maybe at the same target. So maybe there are some targets that exist just so you can hit them up for money, right? Because I think that's also more realistic, where it's like once you rob it once, depending on how much detection,
you go back for more.
Yeah, you need to wait.
I mean, it makes sense in like a gameplay sense.
You need to you have a certain amount of time. But the longer you wait, the less there's. So right after you hit them, security goes way up, and then it goes down over time. and then you need to
Wait
keep
till the heat
scouting
dies
them.
down by doing
Right.
other
But
missions.
Yep. But the conflict is that you have a limited amount of time. So if you wait too long, the longer you wait, the more time you're using on other stuff. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
I would play the hell out of that. I'd also play that game without a time limit, just
Sure.
like.
Yeah.
But I get that would be fun and more challenging for sure.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, the Thief. We should talk about the Thief series.
Okay.
It is probably as close as games have gotten from what I've played to what I'm looking for, and it's kind of set up with what you described as like a series of different types of missions, essentially targets, like the store, the house, the mansion, the bank, the depot, whatever. There's all kinds of different challenges, all based on real type locations, essentially, stuff in a city. Where they lose me is there's a whole other fantasy element layered on top of the Thief games. And at their worst, there are fun things about that element for sure. I mean, there are cool things, but it changes. The game changes. So in level 1 of Thief 1, you are robbing a wealthy baron's mansion. In level 2, you're robbing some keep or something. It's medieval sort of thing, some guards or some shit. But then level 3, you're going into the catacombs, and there are zombies, and there are monsters and shit like that. And it's like, okay, well, this game has changed. This is not the promise. This is not what I want. So, but there are, maybe half the levels are exactly what I'm looking for. Rob the museum. Thief 2 leaned even more into that stuff. Thief 2 is the best. Thief 2 is the best of the series in my opinion, because it stuck to that idea, and it had levels where you went back to locations like you described, and the security was beefed up, and the guards had changed, and there's security cameras now, and that shit's great. I would play that forever. And it seems like in the modern games, from what I've heard, I haven't played the latest one, but they said, I think it's because there's a lot of combat. Like it devolves into combat in a way that is not thiefy.
Right. Yeah, that is kind of what it comes down to. I will say one thing, which is stealth games, thief games tend to be not replayable, right? Kind of like puzzle games in that sense.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it depends, but again, I think it depends how much sort of sandboxy open worldness there is.
Right, exactly.
Because the Metal Gear Solid 5 is a stealth game that you can play. It's all about giving you a shit ton of options. Like you can go in the cardboard box, or put down the sexy magazine and distract the guards, and all kinds of weird shit. Or drop a cow on the base or whatever and see them get distracted. Or
I guess that's sort of what it comes down to, because Hitman's very much the same, where I think the games just get better when the solutions aren't linear, or when there's not just a single solution, right? I think that's what people want.
It must be hard to do, and I think overall it's just a less attractive gameplay type to the masses. And one good reason that we haven't mentioned is it takes longer. It takes longer to play a stealth game to get to the good shit, generally. Unless you really like creeping around slowly, sticking to the shadows, waiting for the guard to pass. But I think a lot of people I don't get off work and go home to fucking just wait around. I want to fucking shoot the gun and run. I want to do the action. I want to do the thing.
Yeah, it's true. Makes me think about how, when I've been looking at the Steam store recently, first of all, I've been very depressed looking at the Steam store.
Why's that? Nothing you want?
Yeah, I don't know that. Steam is better. I've been looking at the Android Play Store, and that's like truly depressing. But yeah,
the games suck.
Yeah, there's not been a lot of. I don't know. I just see the same game in like 700 different forms, and I get depressed about lack of imagination. But it is what it is.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I hope those $30 games do become more, continue to be more viable. Or just like, I don't know, the Patreon model. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kickstarter doesn't seem to really be.
I think Kickstarter is terrible. I think everyone predicted this would happen. People
Well, just they
donated
turned
to a
into
bunch of kids.
scams, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, Patreon is used as Kickstarter now, sort of. Anyway, you just don't have to pay the whole thing up front. But a lot of Patreon games just turn into scams, just like Kickstarter games, where it's like, hey, yep, we're still working on this. Hope you like that demo.
There's no enforcing of making a company finish a game, even if they said they would.
And
You
finishing a
can't send them
game
to
is
jail for that.
bad for the company, right? Like they're incentivized to not finish the game.
Yeah, right.
So
in the short term, yeah.
Yeah, in the short term. And that's what everyone cares about, right? Short-term profits.
Unfortunately, we've kind of set that up, haven't we?
Yeah.
The only other miscellaneous thing I could talk about is, and I think I alluded to this, is the nuts and bolts stuff like lockpicking, pickpocketing. I like the idea of minimizing the sound you're making,
what?
sticking
we
to
should
shadows.
We should talk about something. I think we mentioned this once before. If you ever play WoW as a rogue, you have a very different experience that's set up shockingly well, at least in the early expansions. I don't know about what it's like now. Yeah, because you have stealth. You can actually do a lot of that stuff that you described, where you have alternative ways to finish quests.
Okay.
They still, but they mostly involve assassinating someone and taking their loot, not stealing stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, you're killing shit a lot of the time, right?
But
that's fine. I like that. I mean, playing the D&D style games, I'm interested in playing Baldur's Gate 3. Although that's more characters that have classes, but I would. Yeah, no, you can your main character. Yeah. Like Planescape Torment, I played as a rogue, and that was fun. Like fucking backstabbing the god or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, in WoW, when you play as a rogue, you can do a lot of cool stuff that's literally impossible. Because it was very jarring. Because my first WoW, like I played rogue for basically my first character in WoW all the way to max level, and going back as different characters, I was shocked by how different the experience was. Obviously, it's not going to be impressive. A full experience, but yeah, you can stealth around, you can stab people, you can backstab stuff, or you can pickpocket stuff, you can pick locks. Not that that's very helpful, but yeah, you basically just sneak through places and assassinate people.
That reminds me, in the Realm there was also player-to-player pickpocketing, where you get a window of their pockets and they don't know it's happening unless if you're there are skill rolls that happen basically every time you take something, based on how good your thievery skill is and how good their attention is. I don't know, awareness. What's that called? The
detection? Perception?
Perception. That's probably right. Yeah. That was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, MMOs don't do that anymore. I mean,
yeah, because it sucks to get robbed, and
unfortunately, it just becomes when it's like innocent, I guess. It's fine, but when it sort of becomes systemic, I think it loses a lot of its luster. It's sort of like
when it hurts your other gameplay experience. It's like I didn't ask for this.
So like in WoW originally was built around like open world PvP. Like there are like contested areas, and you're supposed to be able to like run into a member of the other faction, and as you're both leveling for the same quest, and you like fight each other, right? It's like cool, but that's cool when it like arises naturally, but unfortunately when it becomes widespread and systemic, you get like max level people running around killing max level people,
camping all the quests, and
or like people just lying in wait and sort of not doing what they're supposed to be doing for progress. They're just there trying to kill you, right? If they're not max level.
I mean, it all comes back to the getting one over on the other player. Yeah, a little feeling of power that I don't ever get in my real life.
Society, am I right?
Yeah. All day I gotta answer to my boss. I gotta answer to my partner, my parents. Fuck you, Dad. I'm gonna stealth, pickpocket. All right, I feel good about this. Any other stuff you wanted to discuss from the logger notes?
I think we covered pretty much everything I wanted to. Good talk.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And don't go out and steal stuff unless you can get away with it. This has
Open
been Open
betas.
Betas.
Stealing your heart one episode at a time.
Oh, wait a minute.
I'm waiting.
What about the personal stories?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I want to hear yours. I mean, I'll do the brief version. I am a privileged white middle class kid that, in order to get my jollies off, would do minor acts of thievery to be like, I'm cool. I get a rush out of stealing the fucking candy bar or whatever.
So you mean through shoplifting or what?
Yeah, occasional shoplifting. And also, like, I remember a big event in like 4th or 5th grade. We were at some camp, and a couple of guys and I found our way into a room full of like candy and shit, like boxes of candy for the camp counselors.
Oh,
And
I see.
we just took it and stole it all, and it's like, of course we're gonna get caught, but we didn't think about that.
That's funny.
And then we all got brought into the principal's office one by one the next week to get interrogated. And I lied. I didn't snitch, man. I lied, and I got suspended for a longer time because I lied.
Unlucky.
But I think I did the right thing. And I don't know, stealing traffic cones and dumb shit like that.
Where did you
All
put
kinds
them?
on our friends' lawns and shit. I mean, listen, it's there's nothing to admire
That's
about
funny.
it.
Well, it's not really about it. It's more just like it becomes a, when you steal something and it doesn't turn into plus 600 gold or whatever, it actually becomes kind of annoying, right? Because you have to like do something with it.
Yeah, it's just annoying. It's just fucking around with people. Yeah. And like there were friends whose houses we would break into and like not actually rob them, but like steal something off his desk or whatever, like steal his Nintendo game. Yeah. And then just be like, and either just admit it when they accuse you, or I know some kids who just stole games and just never told, and just like,
I can't say I ever knew anyone like that. Gotta say.
I mean, this is an offshoot of like kids who have everything they need, and some kids who don't, and are like, you know what, this fucking kid gets all the video games he wants. I'll just take it. I was that kid. The kid who had all the shit.
I used to steal stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's see, what would I steal? So I would, basically when I was over at people's houses, I would try to steal stuff that I wanted that they had.
Oh, okay, like friends or like
friends'
family
houses.
Friends? Okay, yeah.
I would occasionally steal people's Pokemon cards.
Oh, here we go.
Or steal Legos, attempt to.
Mm-hmm.
Once I attempted to steal a Game Boy game, but I failed, and I still don't really understand how.
What do you mean you failed?
So No, they didn't catch me. I did get caught once or twice, but I was at a sleepover at a friend's house. I took the game and I put it in my sleeping bag and I rolled it up, and then I couldn't find it when I got home. So I don't know if it's gone or if it fell out while they were there or what's up. But yeah, I basically did stuff like that. Because on some level, it's because I didn't have that stuff for two reasons. One is we didn't have money, but the other reason is my parents thought and still think that games are like evil and will destroy your mind, and like playing games is like punishable by death. So
not just like a waste of time and money.
No, like actually will destroy your brain.
Okay. Yeah, it's true for me, but yeah, no, okay.
Yeah.
You were never gonna get this stuff through legitimate.
Right, but what I actually did more of was wheeling and dealing. So in order to get stuff, I had a friend maybe like you actually, who had like really permissive parents, like who kind of spoiled him, and he kind of like didn't really care about value. So like I traded him
this shit. Oh, value. Okay,
yeah. So I traded him like Pokemon Gold plus my Game Boy Color for his Game Boy Advance plus some games he didn't want because he wanted Pokemon Gold.
I see. So he had no concept, of what things were worth.
Yeah. So I upgraded to a Game Boy Advance, and then at camp I like did some errands for another rich kid for Pokemon Sapphire, which he didn't want, and then I got stuff that way. I did a lot of that stuff as a kid. Had to get creative.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. I would be doing the same shit, honestly. Yeah.
Yep.
That's way more justified, I think, than. I mean, it's like, who's the victim there? That's a rich kid. Who cares?
I mean, whatever. Like,
yeah, who gives a shit?
stealing is bad. I would not. I mean, yeah, that's a whole other story.
I think it's totally fine. Like,
yeah.
why does he have it and you don't? Like,
well, if that's justification, you can justify a lot of things in life that maybe we shouldn't do. But
yeah, I mean, I do. I do justify a lot of things that way. So
what can you do?
Well, that's me. Yeah, and I was also just like, I liked the idea of. I tried to learn how to pickpocket, but never got good at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. I think it's very difficult compared to lockpicking.
It's much harder than people make it out to be.
And it's like not something easy to practice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's also true.
So without being like, what the fuck are you doing? But I mean, I would do things like, if someone wasn't looking, I'd slowly reach over and steal their pencil off their desk.
Oh yeah, I did that all the time. Yeah.
Or when they were out of the room, I'd take their books and hide them somewhere. Like, I was a real asshole.
Well, that's just stuff to do because there's nothing to do in school, right? School is so boring that you just have to.
Yeah, I was acting out. I was keeping myself entertained. Yeah, I mean, I was a class clown too, and like just fucked around with everything. I was a real pain in the ass.
Yep.
But not. I feel bad for my teachers.
Now.
Yeah, adult pain in the ass. All right, that's cool. I like to hear about the past of Regal's past, because we haven't done that episode yet about Regal.
Someday, maybe.
All right, everybody. I hope you didn't steal this episode.
It's our third outro.
Well, thanks for listening to Open Betas.
If you paid for this episode, you got scammed.
Just know that I'm smiling about it, though. All right, good night.
All right.
Good night, folks.
Goodbye.
Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling. We never steal cars, but we deal hard. Whip it real hard. Whip it real hard. I call the charge. Whip it real hard. Whip it real hard. Ain't got no funny stuff. Still flipping them chickens. I'm on my money stuff. Still whipping them Benz's. Major league. Catching because I'm pitching. Jose Canseco just snitching because he fiendish. I feed them steroids to strengthen up all my chickens. They flying over Pacifics to be specific. Triple C's, you know it's fact. We holding sacks, so niggas gon' rap. Run and tell them that.